Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, race fans. Welcome back to TRTM for tonight's coverage of the season finale of the HCCL Multiclass Championship Season 4, right here at Round 8. As always, I am Ricard, and you join us here at the home of the former French Grand Prix, right here at the circuit Paul Ricard. Founded in 1970 with this particular layout, minus its Mistral chicane, being introduced in 2005, is comprised of 13 turns and 3.5 miles of FIA Grade 1. Outside of the Circuit de la Sarthe, it's one of France's largest hubs for endurance racing, seeing the longest of the FIM Endurance World Championships races, the Bol d'Or, which has ran since 1978. It also sees racing on four wheels from the GT World Challenge Europe and European Le Mans Series under the 3 hours and 4 hours of Paul Ricard respectively. Otherwise, it sees touring car racing under the veil of the TCR World Tour and Europe Series, cup car racing from the Ferrari Challenge Europe Series, and local competition from the FFSA GT Series. A fantastic circuit of mixed opinion amongst the GT community. Paul Ricard has never failed to give us some of the best racing of the calendar season. We wrapped out the last of our championships with the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup finishing up here in Paul Ricard, so we're better to find ourselves at the final stop of what has been a frankly epic installation of the Multiclass Championship. It has been 63 days since the championship started back on April 11th, and now we approach the end of days here on this championship. 2 championship titles hang in the balance across GT3 and GT4 alike, and here at Paul Ricard, 90 minutes of racing will do away with the formalities and etch potentially some new names into the history books. Taking a look at the regulations for tonight's race, 20-20-90 as it goes here for the endurance races, 20 minutes of free practice, of which you join us in the middle of at the moment, and 20 minutes of qualifying coming up around the corner, segmented of course between the GT3s and GT4s. Following on that, 90 minutes of racing with 2 mandatory pit stops. That will lay claim to 2 championship titles in tonight's round. Following on board with Brandon David, one of the championship challengers in GT4. It is going to be a rather interesting spectacle here, with 2 of the championship titles being defended vehemently by their current holders, being that of Mr. Scallops and Matthias de Munster. We'll get on into the talks of that, of course, in due course, but taking a look at those championship standings in towards tonight's round, and starting things off then more timely here with the GT4s, following on board with the number 16 of Brandon David, who finds himself so tantalizingly close to the lead. Matthias de Munster holds that lead at the moment in his title defense with 167 points. David only a 7-point margin behind. Then 20 points away from the lead, Tom Wells, giving us a 3-way split for GT4's championship title. Stephen Sutton makes 4th place with Richard Claffey in 5th. Matteo Place makes 6th place ahead of Marek Klopsch in 7th. In 8th place, we find that of Aidan Christie with 78 points. In 9th place is that of Toby Goodall, and rounding out the top 10 in GT4 is Tim Bruder with Chevrolet, holding 17 points at the table for the last round of the championship. Taking a look then into the main event, the GT3s, where Pascal Stoltz, in spite of missing out last round, still leads by 10 points over Mr. Scallops. That points margin now down to only 10 points between the pair of them as we head into tonight's round. Anthony Valorio in 3rd with Ted Herkus on recent successes, now only 5 points away from the podium. Himself currently 4th with 111 points. Dennis Damas rounds out the top 5 with Samuel Bell in 6th. Luca Tamburini makes 7th, up ahead of Giacomo Marianelli in 8th place. In 9th, we find Tom Barlow with 60 points in the championship standings. Rounding out the top 10 on recent successes, Tyler Vermack in the top 10 with 59 points. So taking a look across the session here before we get a talk in towards the look of balance of performance and so on and so forth, we did note that both of the current would-be champions tonight have been testing on track. Of course, the GT4 defender, I should say, has been spotted testing alongside one of the championship challengers, currently the championship leader in GT3. So we saw earlier today was Matthias de Munster and Pascal Stoltz testing on track before today's race. Both of them raring to go here as the 2 championship leaders, with Brandon David looking to challenge for that title. It is going to be a rather interesting one in tonight. A war on 2 fronts then being fought for Mr. Scallops. It is a very difficult pill to swallow right now that he finds himself facing down the last round. As it stands to be the case then, 10 points away from the lead. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and for the 2-time consecutive champion, the expectations couldn't be any higher. Taking a look back through the history of this series to reveal And Mr. Scallops holds currently 2 championship titles since the introduction of GT3 into the mix in Season 2 and Season 3. As for GT4, Matthias de Munster looks to defend his title in tonight's round, holding that 7-point lead over Brandon David. Looking back through the history of this series, it was originally M2 Cups and Porsche Cups that saw a victory from Manuel Verzi and Asahi Ota. GT4's first ever championship introduction will be claimed by Christian Lebay, then followed up by Matthias de Munster after what was a very fantastic fight in Season 3 that had it really up in the air for quite some time. Of course, if you remember, back in Season 3 saw one of the best races of the season where we saw fighting between Vladislav Mizin and Tom Wells on the run through a rainy Paul Ricard. Mr. Scallops currently fastest then in the session. So before we get to the end of free practice and in towards qualifying, let's have a glance over at the balance of performance listings. Looking at GT3 finds Lexus with premier advantage. So that's going to be great news for Ted Herkus, who has really laid in quite a dent in the recent proceedings to the championship title since his reintroduction to the series. 11 kilos off the RCF with no restrictor in play. Porsche 9 kilos lighter and Ferrari 3 kilos lighter. BMW gained 2 kilos with McLaren and Lamborghini both gaining 3. Nissan find themselves with a very tough pill to swallow here, and that'll be the same story for Ford, the 2 heaviest in class. We see there, we have been informed there is actually no restrictor on the Ford, but we're going off of what was posted to the Discord server. If that's since been changed, then that obviously does introduce quite a curious mixture here. If Ford's not facing down any kind of engine restrictions, who is there to stop them on the run down the Mistral Straight? Only time will reveal the answers. Looking in GT4 then finds Ginetta lightest, with Aston Martin following with only a single kilo in difference. Audi gain a kilo, same story for Chevrolet, 6 kilos on for McLaren, 9 for Mercedes, 11 for Alpine, Porsche with a 15 kilo ballast. Across the line then, 1:55.812, currently the fastest time set by Mr. Scallops. Leading the charge for GT4 right behind him is Matthias de Munster. Matthew Copsey back into the series after a long hiatus. Of course, those who tuned in 63 days ago would have remembered Matthew Copsey to be the 2nd ever driver in the history of this series to win with Ginetta, taking his first ever win in GT4 in that season, right at the very start. Now he's back on the grid, 2nd fastest at the moment. Brandon David in 3rd, Aidan Christie, a driver with great affinity to this track. Of course, if you tuned in with coverage earlier last season with the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup, you would have seen the 32 take a win on debut in the AM category here at the circuit Paul Ricard. So now fighting amongst his contemporaries in GT4, sharing the grid with the Premier category in GT3. High hopes there as a top 5 time currently for the number 32 Audi. So taking a look at the one who has dominated the season for the most part here, Pascal Stoltz currently tucked in behind Matthew Copsey on the run on towards the Mistral Straight. Of course, no chicane featured on this particular variation of the track. As mentioned, was a more recent introduction with Paul Ricard's modular nature, bringing in several different configurations to the table. This one in particular finds itself without that Mistral chicane, so it gives this huge back straight then off to the GT3s, and it's worth keeping an eye for GT4 as well, especially for any proceedings out of, and I keep an eye there towards Audi in the absence of McLaren in GT4. It could be serious trouble though for the Ginettas of Copsey and Wells to keep up with the rest of the pack down the Mistral Straight. Of course, all will be revealed in due course. And taking a look in towards those championship odds, looking here, currently 33 points left in the championship to be fought for, and the gap to the lead in GT3, 10 points in favour of this one here, Pascal Stoltz. In order for Stoltz to win, he has to finish ahead of Mr. Scallops or go level on points, as it will be decided on number of wins, of which he holds the most at the table. In order for Scallops to win as the challenger now, to try and retake the throne, as it were, he needs to outscore Stoltz by 11 points, not 10. If he goes level on points, it'll be decided on race wins, as per customary nature in motorsports, and that will be, in that sense, given over towards Stoltz. In GT4, it's a 3-way split, so difficult to exactly make amends with who is going to be taking that championship title home today. The gap to the lead, only 7 points between Matthias de Munster and Brandon David. For David to win, he needs to outscore by 8, otherwise we find ourselves in the same technicality in the fight for GT3. And for de Munster to win, same story as for Stoltz, has to finish ahead or level on points. For Tom Wells to win, he's got the heaviest set of circumstances to play against. He needs to outscore de Munster by 21 points and Brandon David by 14. Not an easy set of circumstances to play against there for Wells. He's got definitely the most on his plate for tonight's round if he means to walk home with a championship. It does seem to be a fight amongst the Mercedes cars down in GT4, but it'd be naive not to consider the Ginetta as part of it as a three-way split. We said in our coverage at Donington Park, much the same story. It was going to be 3 cars in contention for that championship. We'll see just how far that line of logic goes. At the moment then for Brandon David, finds himself third in division now with recent times by Matthias de Munster and Matthew Copsey. Aiden Christie in 4th, Claffey in 5th by division. Sutton in 6th, Class A in 7th. Worth noting there for Stephen Sutton, brand new coat of paint. Of course, we've seen him clad in the colours, I believe it was of FAFC for some time. Now we see he's dropped some of the yellow accents there and has now gone for a red, white and blue. Of course, if you're joining us today here on the 13th of June 2026, we are only about having a glance here, just under an hour away from the start of the 2026 24 Hours of Le Mans over in the FIA World Endurance Championship. BMW starting on pole for that. We also have some exciting news surrounding HCCL coming up in towards our new segment after qualifying today. 8 minutes left to go in free practice, and recently then the second fastest time of the session by Pascal Stoltz, 6 tenths away from Mr. Scallops. That's certainly going to be a curious mixture then, with the recent information given over to us that Ford will not be taking its customary 20% engine restriction under LFM BOP regs. It will be flying free with no restrictions on, so all 550 horsepower at the disposal of Pascal Stoltz in second at the moment. He's the only Ford on the grid today. It's also going to be quite a curious day for that of Ted Hurkacz. Of course, taking a look back through those previous wins once again, gave Hurkacz his first win of the season with Lexus in round 7. Looking to keep the ball rolling then on his reintroduction to the series. Things are going to be coming up peachy for Ted Hurkacz in towards the summer, as not long after this series wraps, we get on with a 4-round special here on HCCL, the Ginetta Cups. The Ginetta Summer Special, I believe is what it's called. We'll be going live with that, I believe, next week, so do stay tuned to the Saturday afternoon slot here if you're tuning in from the UK. 4 races in the UK as well, heading across various MSV and Grand Prix circuits, as we'll make a stop over at Silverstone, as well as, I believe, Alton Park, Brands Hatch and Donington, if I'm not mistaken, if not Snetterton. I'll get a look at the calendar, though, a little later. On the focal point of today's event, though, are those 2 championships up for grabs, with 19 cars in attendance, with a likelihood for that list to grow even stronger. We find Ted Hurkacz, one of 7 drivers yet to have set a time here in free practice, the other being Vermac Tamburini, the reintroduction of Alexander Hrinko in the number 3 Aston Martin down in GT4, Samuel Bell, Toby Goodall and Anthony Valorio. Speaking of Goodall, though, we'll see him down towards the line here in the 42. Across the line he went. From behind him there was the number 16, Brandon David, from 3rd. Stays in that position in the GT4s. Matthew Copsey's reintroduction to this category after a long hiatus following his victories in the first round of the championship could make quite a heavy impression on this field, much as we saw for Ted Hurkacz. As a matter of fact, in GT3, Copsey could be laying in some serious damage to the chances for Brandon David here, finding himself 212 thousandths ahead of the number 16. Recent times then now see Anthony Valorio to 3rd in GT3, the number 41 Porsche soldiers on through the Verrières. Whilst we've got the opportunity then, let's go to catch on board with the driver just about to start another flying lap. Who better to get on board with then than that of Matteo Place here at the circuit Paul Ricard. On board then with Place, French driver in a French car, the Alpine A110, the 2017 model, introduced by the Renault Group. At a French track here, home of the former French Grand Prix, of course. On board with Place for the tour of the circuit Paul Ricard. So then starting things right off the bat on the run down towards the Verrières, sometimes also called the Verrières S's or the S de la Verrière. So we make our way up towards turns 1 and 2. This is a very awkward section of the track for the cars with less aero grip, as there's not an awful lot to keep you pressed to the ground, as these are 2 slightly off camber corners for the start of this lap. Out through the Verrières, in towards the Virage de la Hotel. In this section of the track, we've seen to be a major crunch zone, especially on those first couple of laps. Very tight, very technical section following off of what was a relatively high-speed S's section to kick things off. Down through the Virage du Camp, now towards the Virage de la Sainte-Baume. As things open up out past the Virage du Camp, you see the corner starts to shallow out a little bit here to give us a bit of a slingshot from right to left as we rocket down through the Virage de la Sainte-Baume, now on to the Mistral Straight. And much like the Ginettas, the little Alpines are going to struggle in this section of the track with no slipstream to their aid. So in the case of both Sutton and Placé, they'll want to find themselves components of the midfield at the very worst of times in GT4, if not up towards the podium, but they actually will not want to find themselves leading it into that first lap unless they can guarantee coverage from ahead with the GT3s. Down through to the Curve de Saône. Slightly more lenient track limits there, and that's one of the better factors about the circuit, Paul Ricard. It's a little bit more realistic on these GTs. It knows that they're not going to be able to take the corners like the F1s. Down through Le Bousset. Now towards the Virage de Bandor. Up and alongside him there, you see Samuel Bell with McLaren, now 4th overall on track. Up towards the Curve de Garlaban. Into the Virage de la Tour, sweeping left-hander here, deceptively sharp by design, very flat section of the track here, difficult to make out the exact features of it, and that loops directly around into a very sharp right-hander here at the Virage du Pont. Down towards the line then goes Matteo Placé. Because of that intervention from McLaren, he does find himself a tad slower than his personal best last lap at 206.680, still 6th fastest in GT4, and up and ahead of fellow Alpine Stephen Sutton. Nearest to the line, the 888. So here comes Tyler Vermaak, of course. Still a new introduction to this series, but took a win on debut only a few rounds ago. The 888 for 5-Star Esports. Makes his way down through the Verrières with McLaren. We see, though, car as sharp as his is going to struggle in those off-camber sections. We saw the back end step away from him as he wrestles control back into his hands here. So then, 4 currently from GT3 having set time. Stoltz now fastest over Mr. Scallops by a devastating 1.8 second margin. Now we must consider as well, it is of course free practice, so you must take a lot of the times you see here with a grain of salt. We see Tom Wells really just boots it out of the pits, knowing there's no consequence to be found here in free practice of speeding in the pit lane. Only until we get towards qualifying and the race itself will that be trouble for him. As it stands to be the case, only 45 thousandths away from Mr. Scallops is Anthony Valorio, so I don't necessarily know if the pole position for GT3 is so clearly written out. Of course, 1.8 seconds, that could still be quite a fair deal of sandbagging from Nissan. We see the 2-time champion looking for his 3rd, looking to defend his reign of this championship from Pascal Stoltz, the German talent who has dominated Season 4 by and large. We saw his first ever appearances on our screens here on HCCL was over on the Carousel Cup, a 3-parter series that saw racing from the M2s, the BMW M2 CS Cups, then the GT4s, then the GT3s. And in the GT3s, we saw from Pascal Stoltz a move to Jaguar with the Emil Frey XKG3. Then we saw him drop the pleasantries of a slightly more out-of-the-box choice, go straight for what works. In with the 7th gen Mustang, has taken a stranglehold on competition this season. We see Samuel Bell was momentarily in second. Now Tyler Vermaak to second place as McLaren take a strong position amongst the top 3 here in free practice. And as I should clarify, we are in the last minute here of free practice. So coming up just around the corner will be qualifying. 20 minutes of qualifying as always in this championship, and it's split down the middle, so the first 10 minutes will go over towards the GT3s, the last 10 minutes over towards the GT4s, and the race thereafter 90 minutes with 2 mandatory pit stops. As the paddock starts to hush down a little bit here at the end of free practice, awaiting the start of qualifying. First among the fray will be that top level, the GT3s. The end of this session, then, it appears to be Pascal Stoltz fastest, but it is worth noting Samuel Bell still out on track, but he's 1.7 seconds out. Tyler Vermaak second fastest at the end of this free practice session, as it stands to be the case by 28 thousandths over Matthew Copsey. Matthias de Munster fastest for GT4. Of course, it is worth noting that Copsey is still out on track and has that one more lap to set here in free practice. So we'll see where that goes, if anywhere, for the number 97. Of course, we've seen him to be an incredibly capable talent, both in and out of GT. A driver who I believe favours more options over at Grand Prix racing in F1, but still is able to use a lot of the same dogma and a lot of the same technique and the more agile Ginettas down in GT4. I say more agile as in more agile among its contemporaries. I'm certainly not suggesting that that Ginetta can out-corner a McLaren or a Red Bull or Mercedes or what have you. Maybe the Aston Martin, not too certain. Just, you know, just a hunch, call it a hunch. At the end of the session then, Samuel Bell third in GT3. Matthew Copsey still on his way down towards the line here. Bear in mind, 28,000 is what he has to conquer to go alongside Matthias de Munster at the head of GT4. It is worth noting, if he can get up and ahead of both Mercedes cars, he can do some serious damage to the odds between de Munster and David at the head of that field. 7-point difference between those two heading into tonight's round. Of course, qualifying still ahead of us, so nothing is written as it stands to be the case. Behind him, the number 12 and the number 1. Down across the line then goes Matthew Copsey. Stays in that second place spot at the end of free practice. Still great hustle though by Ginetta, and it's going to be exciting to see what comes of it in the qualifying session to follow. Down to the line goes the number 12, Tom Wells, to wrap out the end of this session. Also with Ginetta, currently stacked in a division, looking here 8th. Across the line he goes. Qualifying officially underway then. Let's have a quick glance at the end of free practice just to see if there was a shift of position. For Wells, sadly, was not the case. So de Munster still fastest in GT4 at the end of free practice. Stoltz fastest in the GT3s. And speaking of the GT3s, they've not wasted any time getting out into the mix as the number 46 of Ted Herkus leads the charge. Sadly, no qualifying predictions for tonight's round, but things are looking very, very capable across both categories. It is going to be rather interesting to see the dynamic going on between Herkus, Scallops and Stoltz. Let's not count out Vermaak. It would be a naive thing to underestimate the South African's ability on this grid after such an early time in the Multiclass Championship. Of course, was introduced late on in this series, has only had a few rounds to contest with this grid, but has already made his name very much known to them after his win on debut. On board then with Ted Herkus for Lexus, the number 46. Strong figure of this grid on his reintroduction to things and his win in the last round at Donington. Looking to keep that ball rolling, but what has the Lexus got over the Nissan and the Ford in tonight's round? That's what we're looking to find out. And while 20 minutes of qualifying does seem like a particularly long time for these drivers, it must be worth noting that it is technically split down the middle, so it's two 10-minute qualifying sessions in tandem. So when you look at it that way, we really don't have a great deal of time to work with here in the GT3s, even less so when you consider the GT4s are upwards of 12 to 13 seconds slower per lap. They're losing plenty more time on the outlap here, already having burnt through the first 2 minutes of qualifying. We're on with Herkus for the first of our flying laps here at the Circuit Paul Ricard. A track with a fair deal of history here on HCCL, was one of the best races of last season. It's also got some history with us here on TRTN, as not too long ago we wrapped out the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup here at the Circuit Paul Ricard after a brilliant season with them as well. It's also served as a flashpoint in one of the rivalries in VSR Season 8 between White Doctor, otherwise known as Carlos Dish, and Just Boris, otherwise known as Russell Nash, in their jaded championship between each other. Ultimately, that boiled over at the Circuit Paul Ricard, still fresh in the memory, of course, between those two and ourselves. In terms of straight line speed, it's a tough one to call here, but of the current contenders on the grid, at least for GT3, it's worth keeping an eye on 3 particular manufacturers: Lexus, Nissan and Ford, among the fastest of the grid available to us today. McLaren and Porsche, the other two manufacturers present, courtesy of Bell, Vermac and Valorio. In terms of the GT4s, Chevrolet, courtesy of Tim Bruder, might be worth a shout. As we see they're running out wide at the Virage de Bendor is Ted Herkis. So that's going to give the chance over here to Mr. Scallops. Defending GT3 champion. Two-time GT3 champion here in the multi-class with Nissan. Brand new coat of paint as well, the Stealth Black. Perhaps indicating that shift in mentality, that he's going dark on this, and he's going to be giving it absolutely everything in this last round. So across the line, our baseline time, 1:55.505. From the 394, from behind him, approaches Tyler Vermac to the line, fastest by 1.3. Then Pascal Stoltz by 0.2. New fastest time then by Pascal Stoltz, 1:53.855. Nearest is Samuel Bell with McLaren. Number 21 rounds through the Virage de la Tour down towards the Virage du Pont. One of two McLarens on this grid. Currently makes up one of 5 manufacturers to contest GT3 today. Across the line then goes Samuel Bell to 4th. Ted Herkis reluctantly without a time so far. And that's the same story for Anthony Valorio, currently down the Mistral straight in the number 41. Down through the Côte de Sang. Fast right-hander here. We know for the Porsche, at least, there is the advantage of the much more formidable stopping power on the 41, but he has to be careful in areas like Le Busset, where it's a curved braking zone. That could create somewhat of a pendulum effect on the 41, sending the back end loose, so he can't get too enthusiastic on the brakes in the corners. But if there is a straight enough braking zone, he can really be among the last of the late breakers. We've seen that demonstrated by other drivers in the past, and we've seen it in smaller part by Valorio this season. The strengths of that Porsche. What matters to him the most at this time, though, is setting in a decent lap here in qualifying to find himself at least in the middle of what is a 6-car pack in GT3. He'd be aiming for around 4th. We see with Tamburini's reintroduction to the grid, that does bring the number up to 7. He finds himself 3rd after that first lap of the session for him. But bear in mind, only 4 minutes left to go for the GT3s. Across the line then comes Ted Herkis. Second time's the charm here, and across the line he goes. Still no time set for Mac. Heading towards the line, Scallops just in front of him there. Now goes 3rd fastest for Mac across the line. Stays where he is for Pascal Stoltz. Can he raise the bar over his fastest lap? Not on that go around. Still finds himself settling in with the fastest lap here by 260 thousandths over Tyler Vermac. 1:53.855. Still the fastest in today's session. Also worth noting, leaping out towards the track here, Porsche's Luca Tamburini, who not too long ago competed here at the Circuit Paul Ricard down in GT2, the Porsche 935, at that aforementioned final round of the TRC GT Manufacturers Cup. Samuel Bell across the line, stays in 5th. Number 41 would be nearest to the line then, Anthony Valorio with Porsche. Bear in mind, only 3 minutes left to go here, so he's looking functionally at the scope of possibly 2 more laps at a squeeze in the number 41. That depends on how much fuel he's put into the car. Of course, we know that these drivers do run very light fuel loads because they want to get the most out of the car and its most aggressive trim of the race day. As we mentioned earlier in the stream, 63 days since the start of this championship has led to this very point for these drivers, where 2 championships stand in the balance. As it stands right now, playing the first hand is going to be Pascal Stoltz in qualifying. We see the 41 steps out wide there at the Virage de la Tour. Fortunately, though, for Anthony Valorio, he still has more time here for one more lap, one more go around here at the Circuit Paul Ricard. If not 2, if he can really put the hammer down. Across the line then, we'll see no shift of position, unsurprisingly, there after his troubles down at the Virage de la Tour. Nearest to the line, though, from behind him is the number 46. So it looks like 3rd time's the charm here for Ted Herkis from Lexus. Across the line, goes to 3rd. Then from behind him, the 394, Mr. Scallops, stays in 4th. Vermac to the line from 2nd. No shift of position. Will there be a new fastest time from Pascal Stoltz? Across the line, as it stands to be the case, then we're hitting the glass ceiling on many of these drivers nearest to the line, possibly to set a new lap time onto the charts here as the 7th of the GT3s. It's Luca Tamburini across the line, and I believe he's still got one more shot here. So fortunately for him, just one more lap. As you can see, already queuing on pit exit. Marek Klopsch leading the charge for the GT4s, and behind him there, Brandon David and Aiden Christie. Stoltz. Things are raring up now as he does find himself faced with quite adverse competition. Recent lap then by Samuel Bell puts him fourth. Mr. Scallops' championship chances are starting to dwindle here unless something can be made of it in the next minute and 16 seconds. Of course, he still has 90 minutes of racing to contest, but the idea would be always to put your best foot forward, and Nissan struggling here in qualifying. It's uncharacteristic of Scallops, a driver who is normally sat at the head of the table week in, week out on the Multiclass Championship, has found the greatest challenge of all here in his charge towards a possible third GT3 championship. Bear in mind, that would be consecutive for him as well. He's gone uncontested at the head of the championship charts for the last 2 seasons since the introduction of the GT3 and GT4 ladder onto the Multiclass, the original season being the M2 Cups and the Porsche Cups. Before he won across the line a moment ago, Valorio stays in 6th. Then approaching the line here is the number 46, Ted Herkus. From 3rd on the field, needs 120 thousandths over Vermac. Does find an improvement there, but not enough to shift him to 2nd. As from behind, though, Mr. Scallops now to 4th ahead of Samuel Bell. 16 seconds before the release of the GT4s. The 172 across the line. New fastest time there. 153.842, so a slight improvement there for Pascal Stoltz, now 273 thousandths over Tyler Vermac. As we now get to look in here with the 95, who leaps from the pit lane. Following him, Brandon David and Aiden Christie. Behind them is Matthew Copsey, Matteo Place and Richard Claffey to be the first ensemble of GT4s out onto the track as the GT4 half of qualifying has officially begun. Number 21 will be the last of the GT3s, or be among the last of the GT3s, I should say. Across the line there, Bell rounds out the session in 5th. And the number 21 at the best of times here for that McLaren. Back into the paddock he goes. Joining him there, Luca Tamburini from 7th in GT3. Triple Eight back into the paddock as well. Tyler Vermac stands in at the best of times here, 2nd at the start of round 8. Nearest to the line will be Anthony Valorio from GT3, then following him the 46, the 394 and the 172, and then we'll be catching on board for the first of the flying laps here from the 95 of Marek Klopsch. Behind him, Brandon David and Aiden Christie as our first 3 out onto the field. Behind them, Matthew Copsey and Matteo Place, with Richard Claffey in pursuits, as well as our first group of GT4s sprint out onto the track. We are getting wind now of more of them back out onto the track as well, as we see right now, absentees from Goodall and Wells. Tim Bruder is out on track as well. So is Alexander Hrinko for Aston Martin. Following him, the number 7 of Stephen Sutton. The 41 is back into the paddock, so Valorio peels in for 6th place at the end of qualifying. Herkus dives to the pit lane as well. 394 looks to be following suit then. So at the end of this qualifying session, Mr. Scallops finds himself on the back foot to Pascal Stoltz by 3 positions in difference. And 172 is in. Pole position then for Pascal Stoltz in GT3. And looking to step one bit closer with that 10-point lead over Mr. Scallops. Things are only getting sweeter for the German talent today, as his fortunes continue to shine. Going to catch on board with now the head of GT4 and currently the challenger of the GT4 championship title by 7 points away from Matthias de Munster. Brandon David makes his way first among the fray into qualifying. Staying on board then with Brandon David, we'll leave you with the number 16 and be back to you in just a moment's time. From behind him, Marek Klopsch in pursuits, Aiden Christie in 3rd, and I believe he just vanished completely from radar there, so that's a bit of a confusing one. Is he still at the head of the field, or is that just the 95? I believe it is now just Marek Klopsch, so we'll leave you on board with the Audi. Back in a moment. So as Audi now leads the charge after recent dismays there for Brandon David. I am given information, though, that number 16 is back onto the track as we see, though. The 95 runs out wide, so it looks to be Aiden Christie to be first among the fray to set lap times here in GT4. Across the line then went Tom Wells, now starting his flying lap after a bit of an abrupt re-entry to the grid today. Spending a little bit more time than most in the paddock. You see now also running out wide goes Aiden Christie, so the chances for that first time once again shifts as we now go to catch on board with Matthew Copsey. On his way down through the Virage DuPont, down towards the line we go then. It'll be the 97 to set the first lap time of GT4. Across the line he goes then. For our benchmark time from behind him, the two Audis stricken from the chances to set their first times. Both Christie and Klopsch were off track during their first flying lap. Claffey to second. Then approaching the line, number 5 of Tim Bruder. From behind him, the number 3 from Alexander Hrinko for Aston Martin goes third. From behind them, Stephen Sutton for Alpine second. Sutton's notable addition to the field this season was that win in the Nürburgring. Not one anyone expected then of Alpine, of all manufacturers, to swing through and take a victory in the green hell. Matthew Copsey stands still fastest, but now we find here for Matthias de Munster second, rather surprisingly so, his contention against Brandon David. There is now the very heightened fears for Brandon David over whether or not his connection will remain stable enough to see him fight the championship in GT4. Only 7 points between himself and Matthias de Munster, and with his chances in qualifying sliced down because of that disconnect, he finds 4.5 minutes between himself and the end of this session. Far less time than de Munster has had to set those lap times in. 42 is nearest, so that'll be Toby Goodall. It's been a struggle season here for Goodall, and not to his own fault, because he has, of course, stayed on with Porsche, and you've seen it week in, week out. Porsche has been routinely on the back foot under BOP. For the life of me, I couldn't tell you why that is, because when you get a look at things here, even in the hands of drivers that we see up towards the front of the field, we have seen Copsey to be a former Porsche driver in this championship as well. And the car, yes, it's competitive, but I wouldn't say it's anything groundbreaking. So it doesn't really seem to present a valid argument to me as to why Porsche, at least the 718 Cayman, is being penalized the way that it is under both jurisdictions for BOP on console, whether it's pitskill.io or LFM. Evidently, you take a look back to the past to see that cars like the Porsche and the Alpine, for that matter, used to dominate GT4 in the early meta, but we're a far few years from what that looked like in the past. We see now for Matteo Place third, behind him Richard Claffey. Claffey stays in a Division 6th there in GT4. Mercedes 2nd and 6th. Only one of the Mercedes cars in the top 5 at the moment, that being Matthias de Munster. That, of course, will change with the first lap times not long from now from Brandon David. Number 1 is nearest, so we'll see for Matthias de Munster. Can he claim upon pole position? Copsey currently in his way by 2 tenths. Across the line he goes and stays in second. 3 minutes left to go. Matthias de Munster, as we mentioned in the conversation surrounding that of Mr. Scallops' chances at a consecutive third championship, heaviest ahead that wears the crown. And for de Munster, he soldiered his way through Season 3, and the absence in the last couple of rounds from Vladislav Mizin opened the doors up for his chance to become GT4 champion. And heading in towards this season, he's not wasted any time reassuring the grid that he deserved that title tooth and nail, because he's been a strong force in GT4 all season long. As it stands to be the case right now for de Munster, with Brandon David now third on the grid, and having a glance here by only about 6 tenths of a second, he's going to have to put his heart and soul into tonight's performance to A, get up ahead of Matthew Copsey on his reintroduction to the series, and B, to ensure that 7-point gap does not shrink even by a slight deficit between himself and Brandon David. 2 minutes left to go. Only one time left unaccounted for. Toby Goodall, the number 42 Porsche. Nearest the line, number 97. So back on with Matthew Copsey from Ginetta. Down to the line then goes Copsey. Currently holds the ground then of about, looking here, just under a tenth worth. I believe that's 900ths he's got over Matthias de Munster in second. Brandon David in third. Matteo Place across the line stays fourth. Sutton currently fifth. Christie now sixth. Claffey seventh. Wells eighth. Hrinko ninth. Klopsch rounds out the top 10. We see heading to the line here is Stephen Sutton and Alexander Hrinko. Out through the Virage DuPont. They've got one more shot at things here. Sutton across the line stays in behind Place. As for Hrinko, stays in behind Wells. Number one nearby needs 900ths, remind you, for that pole position off of Copsey. And across the line goes Matthias de Munster. One more shot at pole in GT4. Still holds the ground here over Brandon David, but that could shrink at a moment's notice. We've seen how quickly he's been able to leap up through the order in the last couple of qualifying sessions. I would not take it too out of left field to suggest that he could emerge second in this session. Across the line, you see him already start to slice down that margin. Now he's only looking here under 3/10 away from Matthias de Munster on the timings thus far, and he's still got one more lap to play in before the end of this qualifying session. So definitely up in the air over who leads of the championship contenders, with Wells way down the order at the moment. Of course, the third in three parties involved fighting for that championship. Third in the championship himself, the number 12, by 20 points away from Matthias de Munster. We've seen from Wells before, qualifying's not been his forte, racing has. I'd have a pretty good authority in assuming he'll be able to carve his way up through the order in that nimble Ginetta. Across the line then, the number 12 stays where it is behind Richard Claffey. Starting as it would happen to be the case there, Division 8th in GT4. Toby Goodall finishes the session with no time set, starts at the back of the field in Division, looking here 12th. Number 97 is nearest. Copsey down towards the line. What can he make of things here? It's been a strong reintroduction right at the last stop of the championship for Toby Goodall. Not for Toby Goodall, for Matthew Copsey, I should say. Toby Goodall at the back of the field there. Copsey finishes off with the same time he had from before. We see peeling into the pits goes to 32. Aidan Christie settles in, by looks of it there, for Division 6th. Nearest, the 95 though, Marek Klopsch from 17th stays there. Number 1 nearest to the line. So this is really what rides on the line here for Matthias de Munster. Can he go fastest for Mercedes AMG? Needs 900ths of a second to do so. Actually, looking at it here, yes, that is the case. 900ths of a second. Down to the line he goes. Can he find it? Not on this day. We'll start, by looks of it, Division 2nd. Of course, there is still the number 16 to consider in all of this. Brandon David makes his way down through the Virage de la Tour, down towards the Virage DuPont. Can the 16 triumph over the 1? These two just under 3/10 apart. Down to the line then goes the number 16, the championship challenger for GT4. Starts in behind. No time advantage found in that last lap. So a breath of fresh air and a sigh of relief for Matthias de Munster. He'll hold the ground over his rival in GT4, but does not hold onto that pole position. Your pole sitters by division then: Pascal Stoltz in GT3 over Tyler Vermack and Ted Herkes for the podium, and Matthew Copsey on pole in GT4 over Matthias de Munster and Brandon David. This is going to be a rather interesting start, especially when one considers GT4 and the Ginetta and its struggles in the straightaway. That first sector, I have no doubt Copsey can carve out a very clean start to things here over the two Mercedes cars behind him. But once we get onto the Mistral straight, where things could be complicated for that number 97. I'd also say for Pascal Stoltz, it's not going to be a breezy start for him with a driver like Tyler Vermack in his rearview mirror. We've seen him to be a very swift challenger in the early laps of any race that he's competed in before. And we've seen just how nimble the McLaren is in his hands. We saw it in Suzuka not too long ago. This could make for a very interesting start across both fronts. Taking a look away then from this qualifying session as we head in to the final race of the championship here in the HCCL Multiclass Championship Season 4. Two championships on the line, of course. 90 minutes of racing to follow. 2 mandatory pit stops for both fuel and tyres as per regulations submitted by Race Control. We'll get a full look at the grid in a moment's time, but before we do, having a glance at the news to see that the calendar for Multiclass Championship Season 5 has officially been revealed, and we can show you it here on TRTN. This is what it will look like. We'll return to this series on August 29th at the Grand Prix Circuit Kyalami in Midrand, South Africa for the first round of the championship. Then we head to the Nürburgring right off the bat then in round 2 on September 5th. Then the Hungaroring 2 weeks later on September 19th. Bathurst on September 26th for another 90-minute race. So we get the two 90-minute races in the first half of the championship, so quite the treat there. Then, following on from that, on October 10th, Zolder, October 17th at Watkins Glen, November 7th in the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, and the season finale will be on November 14th at the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari. Otherwise, Imola. We'll see over the course of this season, two projected night races with Watkins Glen and Imola, part of that itinerary. Meanwhile, the two 90-minute races will start in the morning hours there, 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock a.m., respectively, between Bathurst and the N24, the Nürburgring Nordschleife, for Multiclass Season 5. Of course, the other article of news, of course, if you're watching right now, we are only, as it stands to be the case, 14 minutes out from the 2026 24 Hours of Le Mans. The start is imminent. You can catch coverage of that over on FIA WEC Plus, I believe it is, if you're tuning in from Europe. Otherwise, it'll be, I believe, on Eurosport 2. And 30 seconds. We'll be very curious to see how that one unfolds for the grid at this time. So taking a look through the order as it stands right now, looking at the grid formation as they're about to take off into their formation lap. It's Pascal Stoltz on pole position, Tyler Vermaak in second, with Ted Herkus in third, Mr. Scallops in fourth, Samuel Bell in fifth, Anthony Valorio in sixth, and Luca Tamburini rounds out the 7 positions that comprise GT3. On GT4 pole then, Matthew Copsey back into the series after his win in round 1, start ahead of the current championship lead and defending GT4 champion Matthias de Munster in Division 2nd, Brandon David in Division 3rd, the championship challenger by only 7 points away into tonight's round. As we see, beginning the formation lap goes Pascal Stoltz over Tyler Vermaak. Looking further down the order in GT4, however, 4th place for Matteo Place and 5th for Stephen Sutton for Alpine. So 2 Alpines in the top 5 of their home race here in France. A great sight to see for the A110 as we watch there with Brandon David. Let's go to catch on board though with Pascal Stoltz at the head of the field. Taking a look then further down the line, Aidan Christie in Division 6th with Richard Claffey in 7th. Beginning the run down to the Verrières, we see Tom Wells in 8th, Brinko 9th, Klops 10th, Bruder in 11th. Toby Goodall rounds out the 12 positions that comprise GT4, 19th overall on this grid, and 12th in division. Going to catch on board then with that leading four. The 172, Pascal Stoltz, has been a sensational showing over the course of this season, but now has between himself and the possibility of etching his name into the history books here on HCCL. 90 minutes of racing to conquer here at the home of the former French Grand Prix. Stoltz heads up the field ahead of championship challenger would-be Tyler Vermaak and Ted Herkus, had it not been for their sort of differences in attendance. Of course, Vermaak, very late entry into the championship. I have it on good authority, though, if we see him again for Season 5, there is nothing to rule out the possibility of him contesting a championship against Stoltz, against Herkus, against Scallops, against Valorio, for that matter, as well. Ted Herkus, of course, was an on and off appearance over the course of Season 4. We saw, of course, his first ever appearance on our screens here on HCCL was over on the Silverstone Ginetta Cup Special quite a fair few months ago. We got technical insight from Tom Wells from Ginetta. Brake pedal spring broke on Monday, and he's struggling to get used to the stiffer one as he's been forced to put a brand new, I believe, brand new brake pedal spring in on his setup at the moment. So it's going to be a little tougher to get the car slowed down there. And of course, with a lot of these sim races, it's a case where they become very one and the same with their setup. They start to learn the setup more than they learn the car. In the case that it becomes muscle memory, if even the slightest variable changes, you can see a notable drop in performance. That's what's affected Wells's qualifying performance today. Of course, we know that it's always been the case where Wells's qualifying performance has always been around that midfield in GT4. He prefers to challenge on the actual race itself, but that could also be an explanation here, especially when one considers Wells was one of the best talents on the grid for GT4 in our last visit to the circuit. Paul Ricard was able to go confidently toe-to-toe in wet conditions with Vladislav Mizin. Today's qualifying session, of course, with the technical issues surrounding his rig, have been a massive playing factor in why he's starting as far down in GT4 as he is. But high hopes that he can carve his way back up through the field. Looking here, though, with GT3, Pascal Stoltz heads that charge up towards the Virage du Bendor. Now, looking at the overtaking spots here on track just before we get to the end of the formation lap, of course, worth keeping an eye then down for the run through the Virage de la Hotel to the Virage du Camp down in Sector 1. Of course, the Mistral Straight will be chief among them for overtaking opportunities in the slipstream. The Curve de Sang to Le Busset section of the track will also give us plenty of overtaking opportunities, and it's only until we get here towards the Virage de la Tour and the Virage du Pont, this sweeping, super sharp S section, will give over opportunities for a possible switchback we've seen demonstrated in the past. "63 days between us and the start of this championship way back on April 11th. We're in the end of times now for Season 4, down towards the line then. 19 cars in attendance, 2 championships on the line, 90 minutes of racing following us ahead here at the circuit Paul Ricard. Without further ado, for the last time this season on the HCCL Multiclass Championship Season 4, we are green and racing here in Le Castellet, and a great start from the front row in GT3. Right off the bat, it's also worth noting a brilliant start by Anthony Valorio right up to the rear bumper of the Nissan and the Lexus on the second row. Heading up towards the Verrières for the first time, we see a great getaway then from the 172. Having a glance in though, Ted Herkus has a great start also to go side by side with Tyler Vermaak. It's contact from behind. Vermaak turns around, immediate trouble for the McLaren. Dropping in now towards the pack of GT4s. It's worth noting a brilliant start on the cards there by Matthew Copsey. Getting a look in with the GT4s. We see here the 2 championship challengers would be the Defender and the Challenger, I should say, now joined by Tom Wells. And I had the good authority to assume never count Wells out on the race. The qualifying may not be much to speak of, but have a glance there to see that Tom Wells is side by side and by looks of it ahead of that of Brandon David. Down to the run of the Mistral Straight for the first time. An exuberant start from Ginetta. Looking here in GT3 though, the 41 and the 813. The 2 Porsches of GT3, Luca Tamburini and Anthony Valorio, side by side. Up in front of them is Samuel Bell. Looking here with the GT4s, a great start for this one as well. Alexander Hrinko looking to challenge with Richard Claffey and Stephen Sutton. Behind him is Marek Klops of Audi Sport in towards the Curve de Sang for the first time. Claffey side by side there with Sutton. He's on the inside on the run through the Curve de Sang. Now down towards Le Busset. We see looking for the inside also is the Aston Martin of Alexander Hrinko in the number 3. Looking for the inside there off of Stephen Sutton's number 7 Alpine. Couldn't yet find the ground as he loses out the inside line down at the Curve de... not the Curve, sorry, the Virage de Vendôme, not the Curve de Vendôme, that's the Curve de Garlaban we're thinking of. We see now into that section, the 95 getting some ground here on Hrinko. That's Marek Klopsch with Audi Sport. Looking back up at the head of the field though, Matthew Copsey leading over Matthias de Munster, Brandon David, as it happens to be the case there. Now third, Aidan Christian fourth. Tom Wells drops here to 5th. But a great start for that number 12. Shook off some of the dust there in qualifying, got right back into it. Pascal Stoltz leads over Ted Herkus, Mr. Scallops in 3rd, Samuel Bell 4th, Anthony Valorio in 5th, Tyler Vermaak back up now into the main pack of GT3s after his trouble down at the Verrières with contact between himself and Ted Herkus on lap 1. He's up ahead of Luca Tamburini, who rounds out the top 7. De Munster holds 1.2 seconds over his rival in GT4. This is all he'd need is to finish ahead of Brandon David, and the championship would once again be his in GT4. But he's got that bright yellow hurdle in front of him, that being the 97. He would like to take home another race win to go alongside the championship title, if that is a possibility here for De Munster. But let's, of course, not get too far-sighted about things here. He still has to keep that 16 off of his trails. As we head in past the first 3 minutes of racing, looking in behind to see a 4-car spread here in contention of the last of the top 5 spots for GT4. Aidan Christie versus Matteo Place versus Richard Claffey versus Stephen Sutton. Meanwhile, up the order here, we do get to see some fighting between Anthony Valorio and Samuel Bell. This is down through to Le Busset for 4th place in GT3. Looking for the inside then, the number 21 McLaren's got the rotation on the 41. Valorio forced out wide then, as he tried to go late onto the brakes there, ultimately was too wide down in towards Le Busset, falls back in to the back of the top 5. Right behind him, have a look there to see Tyler Vermaak in hot pursuit with McLaren. The maneuverability almost unparalleled in GT3. We saw it in Suzuka, just how much an advantage he holds over the rest of the field with just how aggressively he's got that car set up. You can see getting the elbows out down through to the Virage du Pont, parks it there on the apex. Vermaak not taking no for an answer after a brazen start between himself and Ted Herkes. Speaking of, we see Herkes here by just over a second away from the leading Mustang of Pascal Stoltz. And behind him then is Mr. Scallops, still in pursuit here, but it's got to be a painful remark to see. There's closer fighting between second and first than it is between him and second. As for Samuel Bell, we see a fight between the two McLarens, now down through to the Virage de la Hotel. As Tyler Vermaak looks to size up a challenge here on Samuel Bell off the exit of the Virage du Camp, now down through to the Virage de la Saint-Baume. Anthony Valorio still glued on in behind them. Having a look at some of the closer fighting at the moment to see Matteo Place now in the top 5. Fighting off Aiden Christie behind them. Another Alpine sets their sights on the Mercedes of Richard Claffey. Stephen Sutton was looking for a shot there down through the Virage de la Hotel. Behind them, Alexander Hrinko, Marek Klopsch, Toby Goodall and Tim Bruder to round out GT4. Looking in here, Vermaak, V Bell, V Valorio down the Mistral. Meanwhile, Herkes is gaining ground on Stoltz. It might be a fight of the V8s up at the front of the field. We see Vermaak on the inside at the curb to Sang. Samuel Bell's out wide. It was a snap there for the McLaren. He had to recollect himself before he spun out. Ultimately went super wide and falls in behind Anthony Valorio. Now down to 6th place then for Samuel Bell. Valorio into the top 5. Vermaak to 4th. Tamburini still close in behind. 3.5 seconds there in the last interval. That'll be a lot closer as we head into the next part of the race. Looking in here, looks to be the case we're seeing from behind. Claffey v Sutton side by side down at the curve to Sang. Alpine and Mercedes challenging for position. Claffey falls in behind Sutton, but he might have a run on the inside here down through Le Busset. He's got the shot there, but falls out of it. Up in front of them, Tom Wells versus Aiden Christie on the cards right now, but have a look in behind to see another Alpine in the mix. Oh, it's contact from in front. Contact between the 32 and the number 12. Through goes Place, and it looks to be the case. Following on with him there is Stephen Sutton. Contact down at the Virage de Bandor between Aiden Christie and Tom Wells. And more contact in force there. The 32 rubs wheels with the number 7. Down through the Virage de Pont. Alpine really shoving Aldi out wide there. This is my track, they say. We see, though, on the straights, the Audi different kettle of fish entirely. Over the Alpines, of course, more than double the cylinders. Well over 3 times the size of an engine there. 1.8 litre inline-4 turbo with Alpine. Meanwhile, 5.2 litre naturally aspirated V10 in the Audi R8 LMS. Behind them, though, bi-turbo V8, 4 litre. From Mercedes-AMG and Aston Martin, for that matter, sharing the same platform. Looking up at the head of GT3 to see here a battle on 5.4 litres. Lexus versus Ford. The thunder of the V8s reign over the head of the field. Behind them, though, is a V6. The VR38 DETT. The Nissan GTR. Mr. Scallops in 3rd with Vermaak 4th, Valorio 5th, Bell 6th, Tamburini 7th. Copsey still leads then. It may be the land of the V8 up in GT3, but in GT4, the Ford Cyclone V6 reigns supreme. Looking further down then to see the still ongoing action, I should remark, there between Sutton and Claffey down through the curve to Sang behind them, Prinko and Klopsch. Continuing to get their elbows out here in contention for the last of the, by looks of it here, top 6 spots in GT4. Down at Le Busset behind them. Looks to be the case there, sundering a bit of lap time there. Number 3 of Alexander Hrinko losing ground off to Marek Klopsch. And we are keeping a close eye on that gap as it continues to shrink between Herkes and Stoltz. It's worth noting in the last lap, Herkes now fastest in terms of lap times. Roughly speaking here, on a 2-stop race, 90 minutes of racing, we'll be seeing a pit stop on average every 30 minutes, so we're still a fair distance out from the likelihood of that. This time, 9 minutes into this race here at the last round of Season 4, the HCCL Multiclass Championship. Down through the Verrières then, side-by-side action. Now see Marek Klopsch up and ahead of Alexander Hrinko. The Audi slowly but surely gaining ground. Meanwhile, having a look in behind here to see clawing his way back up to the rest of the field, the number 12 of Tom Wells, who we saw recently shoved out wide at the Virage de Vendor by Aiden Christie, currently 5th in GT4 at this time, and looking to hunt down Matteo Place with Alpine. Herkus now half a second from Stoltz, so it may very well be worth getting a look in with the leading GT3s here as action starts to build between the 46 and the 172. Getting a look in then with the leading Mustang in his defense of a race win today, and the championship title therein on board with Pascal Stoltz at the fight of the lead. We're seeing it in the corners here. The Lexus, a car far older than the Mustang, finding even more maneuverability in the barriers. You may see that also demonstrated here down towards the Virage de la Hotel, Virage du Camp and Virage de la Saint-Baume in Sector 1. It's a bizarre dichotomy to study here between these two cars because they're nearly a decade apart in terms of their design. The Lexus RCF was introduced, I believe, in 2015, if not 2016. A design now a decade old at the time of recording. The Ford Mustang in its 7th generation GT3 form was introduced in 2024, only some 2 years ago. Yet they find themselves this close in performance. Of course, two sides of the same coin. Robust 5.4 litre V8 platform, though if I'm not mistaken, actually not the same engine, despite its similarities on paper. That hasn't stopped, however, the devs on ACC using the same sound file between these two. .4 of a second between these two at the head of GT3's fight, heading down the Curb de Garlaban. On our way to the Virage de la Tour. Nearly 15 minutes in then on round 8 here at the season finale. As it stands to be the case, if we can hold this kind of ground over scallops, there is nothing that will stand in the way of Pascal Stoltz's procession to a championship title. But of course, still plenty of time to consider. 78 minutes in total between himself and the end of today's race. A very strong start nonetheless after the first 12 minutes of competition. It's worth noting, though, even more so for Herkus, we saw took a win on return to the series in round 7 at Donington Park. The Lexus, as we mentioned several times here, is adamant to keep the ball rolling, and you can see through the current attitude on the grid, Herkus definitely has got the right mindset here to challenge Pascal Stoltz. It's worth noting that Stoltz is a sort of a round out of sync here. He, of course, missed out in Donington, wasn't an attendee to round 7 of the championship. That's what brought the championship title much closer to contention here between himself and Mr. Scallops. It's why we now sit at a 10-point difference between Nissan and Ford at the head of the field. While Herkus doesn't stand a chance in going in towards championship contention material on this round, of course, was ruled out of it after his multiple absences over the course of the season, he still can do quite a fair deal of damage here. That's the same story then for Matthew Copsey. So it makes this all the more intriguing. In terms of that GT4 championship fight, though, as it stands, and if they finish in the order they are right now, Matthias de Munster will hold on to the championship title, on for his 2nd consecutive GT4 championship in this series, holding the cards up and away from Brandon David. Now, getting a look in here for the fight of a Division 4th. Actually, Division, 4th we're seeing between Aiden Christie, Matteo Place, Stephen Sutton, Richard Claffey, and Marek Klopsch. A 5-car battle in force here for Division 4th in the GT4s. Leading that charge then the Audi of Aiden Christie, a driver very familiar to this circuit, to this venue. Took a win on debut to the AM category over on Competizione Performance League's GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series in the very same 32 Audi we see here in the multi-class. Having a look back up quickly to GT3 to see that gap is still shrinking between these two. Under half a second now between the 46 and the 172. You can see the intensity is not showing any signs of stopping from Herkus. Laser set now on the chances for a race lead here in Paul Ricard. Down the Mistral, this is where Place and Sutton are vulnerable. We see Cygnus71 in chat saying if Hercus wins, he'll buy him a Big Mac. I mean, it's certainly, yeah, I mean, in the absence of any champagne, I imagine, yeah, Big Mac will suffice. Looking here, though, with the GT4s, Christie holds ground away from both Alpines at their home race. Of course, both of these cars assembled over in Dieppe. Over at the Renault Group plant. Surrounded on all sides, though, by German machinery, with Audi and Mercedes both pursuing. Getting a look back up, though, at the options menu, apparently, but having a glance here to see Pascal Stoltz still holds the ground off of Ted Hercus, but it's again worth noting, similar to what we saw in that last interval where it was just under 5 tenths of a second, this is now under 4 tenths as he continues to reel in Stoltz. He's got him on the hook here and is just slowly but surely reeling in that Mustang. The way that he's able to follow so consistently here, it's like he's got an invisible tow rope attached to the back of that Mustang. It's just clinging on for dear life in the corners. It's a very strange thing to see, though. A car as dominant as the Ford Mustang be challenged by any machine, let alone a car nearly a decade older than it. Into the pit lane for the first of our pit stops is Samuel Bell. After 15 minutes of racing here. A short stint to start things off then for the number 21. Meanwhile, it's worth noting for Hercus, he has dropped distance, supposedly here from 390 thousandths to 588 in the last interval. Taking a look, though, at the two Alpines as we once again get a look in here from the run of things in GT4. We now get a glance at the fight for 4th place as now up and ahead, so it appears there, of Marek Klopsch, but closing on Aiden Christie is Stephen Sutton. Marek Klopsch now drops to the back end of the top 6 for GT4, now facing off against Richard Claffey, who is himself up and ahead of Matteo Place. The number 49 now in 15th overall, but as it stands by division, that is, I believe here, having a glance, that is Division 8th. Still with a chance, though, to fight the 93 and the 95 as his fellow Alpine soars up through the order. Half a second down through the Garage de Bendor. Traffic in the way, though, there. That's the number 5 of Tim Bruder with Chevrolet. And Toby Goodall in the number 42 up in front. So let's go and catch on board if we can here with the leading GT3s. He rubs his way around the 42. From behind was contact. That was Ted Hercus. He made contact with the Porsche of Toby Goodall. Nearly collected by Tim Bruder. You can see that the gap is closing in now rapidly with these two having been slowed down by the GT4s. It's a controversial turn of events for the 46. But still adamant in his pursuits over Pascal Stoltz. Let's go to catch on then with the attacking 46, Ted Hercus. Like a thing possessed here at Paul Ricard, will not let go for love nor money to the chances to fight for that race win. Side by side with Tom Wells. It could be even more trouble. It's a bit of a squeeze there, but held in behind the Ginetta. Oh, this is going to be too frustrating from the point of view of the Lexus here. Held off. Now over a second and a half's worth of a gap opened up. He'll be seeing red all race long now because of the pesky GT4s in his way. The worst place to have caught them up here. He would have much preferred on the run down the Mistral, as we see here, where you can just glide on past the rest of them. Pascal Stoltz can breathe a sigh of relief, now 2.1 seconds in the lead. Getting a glance in here, this is Richard Claffey. A driver who we not too long ago saw winning in the Rookies division over on the NLRL Sunday League in his time with Porsche. Back in here for the last round with GT4. Currently looking to fight then for 6th place with Marek Klopsch. Matteo Place hounding him from behind, though, in Division 8. You can see approaching that bright fluorescent green number 172. That is a terrifying thing to see in your rear view mirror. I'd much have the same expression as that Alpine if I had the Mustang in my rear view mirror as well. Getting up past them, though. No troubles this time around, but it does lead to Claffey running out wide, so Place has the chance here on that fight for 7th. Meanwhile, yellow flags down for the number 41. There has been quite a fair bit of problems here for both the 41 and the 888. So that's for Tyler Vermaak and Anthony Valorio down at the Virage de Bendor. And I believe that has given quite a fair bit of a gap here up towards Luca Tamburini. You see Valorio with damage could be into the pit lanes on this lap. Back in the green flag conditions. Same story for Vermaak. So we see there, diving to the pit lane goes the 888, the 41 likely to follow then. As also into the pit lanes goes Matthias de Munster, looking for a possible undercut strategy on Brandon David, looking to play this tactically in the number 1. Valorio and Vermaak now both in the pits. De Munster along with them. Copsey still leads GT4. Brandon David now up to second. Aiden Christie in 3rd. Sutton in 4th by 1.1 seconds. In front of him there, you can see that was Ted Herkus, 2nd in the GT3s. And starting to close down that gap. That's a terrifying margin to consider. It was 2.1 seconds when we last saw it between Stoltz and Herkus. And oh my word, have a look here. Look how quickly he's drawn the gap in. As we see fighting between Place and Claffey, we go to take a look on board with the 2 leading GT3s to find, I believe, is definitely the chances here of the 46 possibly taking the lead. He has closed in on Pascal Stoltz at a rate of not unlike anything I've ever seen. It makes you wonder then, was there a possible slowdown for the 172? Did he willingly give up some of that gap, or is there further complications we're not quite yet seeing for Pascal Stoltz? Looking to catch on with that 172 as troubles continue for the 172. Pascal Stoltz still leads here in the circuit, Paul Ricard, and it doesn't look like any apparent damages are afoot here on the Mustang, but he is losing a lot of time off to an enraged Ted Herkus. When one considers we're just under 9 minutes away from the projected first pit stops for many drivers, having lost 2 seconds in that last lap, I'd likely assume then traffic intervention on the 172 as we see slicing his way back up to the rear bumper of the Mustang is Ted Herkus. Down through the Virage La Hotel. Lexus versus Ford here in Le Castellet. Down the Mistral straight, loses there just over half a second between himself and Stoltz. That's where the Mustang really can spread its wings and fly here. I believe that would make it less of a Mustang, more of a, what is it, a Pegasus, I believe is the flying horse. Of course, in the absence of that engine restriction, that's played wonderfully into the hands of Pascal Stoltz. And also no engine restriction on the Lexus, another car to have seen restrictions over the course of this season. These two uncapped then on the engine power. 550 in the Mustang, I believe around the same there for the Lexus, though no exact figure we've got at the moment to our disposal. To have noted, though, that definitely could be higher than 550 because the older GT3s do actually have a little bit more power. The BMW M6, for example, makes upwards of 580 horsepower. We see looking for the inside of the Virage DuPont. So away from the little factoids about older GT. Having a look in here for what's in the here and now is the fight for the race lead once more. Just as it would stand there, 700ths worth of an advantage in the last lap. Herkus is back on the charge, 2 tenths away into the very air. Looking here from trying to get the defending angle of which, from Pascal Stoltz's point of view, on board with the Ford. Down through the Virage La Hotel. Into the Virage du Camp. You could see almost the moment of hesitance from the 46. There was the kindlings of the thought that he might have gone for the inside down to the Virage du Camp, but it was just simply too risky a move this early on in the race. Of course, still far from the halfway mark. 6 minutes before the projected first pit stop window. Of course, we have seen a few changes to that rule. Vermac and Valorio into the pits on emergency damages. We've also seen Toby Goodall into the pit lane early. Anthony Valorio, of course, we saw earlier. But we've also seen for that of Matthias de Munster, one such example also. We see now right up to the rear bumper. This could end in tears between Stoltz and Hercus. They're side by side in towards the Curve de Sang. Will they emerge? Still side by side. No, back in a single file down towards Le Busset. Possibly looking for the inside. Then the Lexus cut off by the Ford. It's only until we get to the second half of it here where another move could be made. Now off the exit of Le Busset up towards the Virage de Vendor. Super close racing then between the 172 and the 46, but nothing yet budges for a change of the lead. The 42 up in front of them there, that's Toby Goodall in GT4, now getting up and around the outside of him on the Curb de Garlaban, back onto the racing line for the run, down through to the Virage de la Tour, down to the Virage de Pont at turn 13. The 46 still held off there as the 172 holds the inside, but he is setting himself up for a switchback. We know just how formidable both cars are under acceleration, so it's any man's game down the opening straight towards the Verrières as we enter lap 13. In that last lap just gone, to the advantage was Ted Hercus, still faster than Pascal Stolten, is looking to go the long distance here at the Verrières, trying to go later onto the brakes to go around the outside on the 172. The 46 trying his luck here. Could he have the chance off the exit of the Verrières? So close, but no cigar. Great defensive position there by Stoltz. Put the hammer down and let the Mustang do the talking. The number 3 picks up a drive-through for track limits. Recent troubles then for the number 3 down in GT4. Believe that might be Hrinko, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that is the Aston Martin of Alexander Hrinko in trouble. Back up at the head of the field, though, as one of our major talking points for action today has been Stoltz v Hercus. The slipstream was where Hercus in the last lap was able to get claustrophobically close to Pascal Stoltz at the head of GT3. And we could see the Lexus starting to reel him back in, but will it be anywhere near as close as the Curve de Sang looms just a moment away? Heading in towards the Curve de Sang, there is definitely the chances. Both of them intentionally out wide there. The track limits do allow for it. Down through Le Busset. Still watching over the rear wing of Pascal Stoltz's Ford. It's in that second half there of Le Busset where the Lexus has a little bit of bounce back. Around the Curb de Garlaban in towards the Virage de la Tour. The 172 still holds that ground and realistically only has to do so for about 2 more laps at a squeeze there under the sort of baseline strategy for drivers today, a 30, 30 and 30 on the stints. In the last lap, though, it was actually Stoltz faster than Hercus. We see Hercus was edging up towards the inside there at the Verrières. He looks to possibly commit to it, but backs out. Was attempting to throw Stoltz off the line there, try and force him to play a little bit more defensively, which would have left the racing line a lot more open off the exit of the Verrières. Down through the Virage de la Hotel. Virage du Camp now, Saint-Baume, heading up round. Awkward section we noted in our track tour here of the circuit Paul Ricard as it opens up and sends the drivers into this slingshot here. So if the car's a little stiffer to rotate, you'll definitely be feeling it down through the Virage de la Saint-Baume. It's now putting the distance back up half a second between the pair, but that will close down once again, especially in the top end where the Lexus has just ever so slightly more in the slipstream over the Mustang. Now, both of them top out, according to our data and statistics, at around 175 miles an hour at the very high end of it. That was from setups we sampled at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. Now, they'll not be too far off that here at Paul Ricard, but of course, with more corners, they have got a slightly higher downforce setup than what they would have had over at the Temple of Speed, if we can get the words out in time. Down through the Virage de Vendor. In the pits at the moment then is both Alpine, Sutton and Placé. Let's get a look around the field then to see recent updates from the rest, as we have been lasered in on this fight for the lead for the longest time. So Sutton and Placé both into the paddock, with Placé already on his way out. We'll see Sutton not long from now then drop off the jacks and he'll merge right along with his fellow Alpine at their home race here in Le Castellet. The Alpine A110 has been a very sort of lovable underdog choice on the GT4 field, much like the Ginettas, as the featherweights in category. Oh my word, closing in right onto them there was Stoltz, as we now get word that Hercus is in the pit lane. Scallop stays out. Tamburini currently fourth then after recent dismays for Vermac and Valorio, and an earlier pit stop strategy from Bell. We see now into the pits goes Copsey. What's the choice here for Brandon David? Has yet to meet the pit lanes to match the strategy from Matthias de Munster. Of course, we saw in the pit lane quite a fair time ago. Hercus in the paddock at this time. Scallops will stay out into second. Tamburini stays out into third. Darting to the pit lane goes Aidan Christie. Following him, Marek Klopsch. Richard Claffey stays out. Tom Wells, we'll see what the strategy is here. The number 12 looks to dive in towards the pit lane there, and we see it's a very quick stop into the pit for these drivers, and that's what they've got to keep privy to here, as it's very easy for them to pick up a penalty here at the Circuit Paul Ricard. Staying out then, Tim Bruder. Of course, we saw earlier into the pits was Matthias de Munster. Still yet to have seen Brandon David match that strategy, as he now takes the lead of GT4 for the time being. Ted Hercus re-emerges then, by looks of it, fourth place with the fastest lap. Next in his iron sights in category would be Luca Tamburini and Mr. Scallops. Stoltz then holding that lead. We'll see, though, if there is a reactionary pit stop coming up on this lap here, whether it's in direct response to an attempted undercut by Hercus. Will he meet this adversity head on? Yes, as the 172 is into the paddock on his 15th lap of racing. Then in goes Pascal Stoltz, the current race lead. Mr. Scallops, could he follow in that line of thinking? The 394 still with a championship to contend here. May try and go to stay out longer. No, into the pit lane goes Mr. Scallops. So I think he might try and play a more ambitious strategy towards the end of this race, if all else fails. Noted there a disconnect from the field. We're now down to 18 cars in competition. I believe it was one of the GT4s that has sadly dropped away from us today. Luca Tamburini will be next in consideration for the pits. Of course, we've just seen Alexander Hrinko complete their pit stop in GT4. Brandon David is now in. As for Luca Tamburini, staying out, so it would appear, to inherit the race lead off of Stoltz and Scallops. Now, a fast pit stop here could put Scallops at the head of this fight, but I think it is still going to be much in the favour of the Ford. We see off the jacks there for Pascal Stoltz. Mr. Scallops, we'll see not long then off the jacks himself. And right about looking at it here, as we see now peeling into the paddock, goes Brandon David. It's a much longer stop than we would have expected of the Nissan. We've still yet to see him actually come up off the jacks. Claffey in the pit lane. Bruder, as it would look to be the case here, staying out for Chevrolet. Copsey, not long then from returning to leading form, but of course has to contest with the Mercedes of Brandon David. Claffey into the paddock there now alongside him. Bruder stays out to inherit GT4's lead. Copsey will hold the ground then up over Brandon David, but it's really now the case for Matthias de Munster. And we do see it is razor thin, but de Munster leads over Brandon David. So a foiled undercut strategy there. Or, sorry, a foiled overcut strategy, I should say, more relevantly. Luca Tamburini, last of the GT3s yet to have taken either of his two pit stops. The rest already having taken their first, with Hercus in second, Stoltz in third. It's worth noting in the case here for Ted Hercus, now holds the ground. So a successful undercut strategy from Ted Hercus to have that back and away then from Pascal Stoltz. Now is effectively set here to lead in the Circuit Paul Ricard, the 46, playing a very, very strong strategy in the first of two pit stops today. dropping in past the first 30 minutes of racing here in the season finale of Season 4, the HCCL Multiclass Championship. As it stands right now, until he comes into the pit lane, Luca Tamburini leads in Le Castellet. Ted Herkus now leading over Pascal Stoltz of the drivers that have taken their first of 2 mandatory pit stops. Mr. Scallops currently 4th then on the grid. Samuel Bell in 5th, Tyler Vermack in 6th, and Anthony Valorio in 7th. Tim Bruder now into the pit lane is going to give rise to an exchange of the race lead then, with Bruder into the pit lane. It's going to be Matthew Copsey back up into leading form here in GT4, with Ginetta looking at their 3rd possible race win of the season. Copsey leading over Matthias de Munster. Brandon David in 3rd. Aidan Christie looking at a possible 4th of Klops behind to round out what is a possible top 5 here, with 2 Audis now holding the ground over what has been quite a stiffly met bit of competition from Alpine at their home race. As it would stand to be the case then 6th and 7th once they get out past Tim Bruder for Matteo Place and Stephen Sutton. Behind them, Richard Claffey, Toby Goodall, and then Alexander Hrinko, who recently saw a penalty. So now that the shoe's on the other foot, what is Stoltz going to be able to do to try and catch up to Ted Herkus? Of course, we know that Luca Tamburini is not too long away then from that first of 2 pit stops, as now the last of any driver yet to have taken their first of 2. 813 does stay out though onto lap 18, so a curious case here for the Argentinian talent. Going the extra mile in GT3 at this time. Up in front of him there, Tim Bruder, having recently left the pit lane. Now falls in behind Richard Claffey, but ahead of Toby Goodall and Alexander Hrinko. As for Cygnus 71 in chat, no, Tamburini has not yet come into the pits. Still has 2 to serve. Everyone else having taken their first already. We do find here the emergence of a brand new fight. Now going to catch on board with the number 21 and the 888. We find a fight going on here for 5th place. Tyler Vermack versus Samuel Bell. We've seen the talents on display over the course of this season from Tyler Vermack with McLaren. Win on debut in this championship. Now goes later of the 2 onto the brakes. Round the outside at the start of the Verrières. We'll have the inside at the second part. Side by side here, but with less momentum to carry. Samuel Bell keeps the foot buried in the floor of the car to hold ground onto 5th place. Up towards the Virage de la Hotel. Vermack may have met his match here in the form of fellow McLaren Samuel Bell in the number 21. These 2 towards the back end of the GT3 standings. 53 minutes left to go then. We're theoretically speaking about 22 minutes away from the next projected window of pit stops. But of course, we've seen that to be a little bit more on the shakier side in terms of its accuracy. Down the Mistral straight, this is where Vermack has the easiest opportunity to gain ground here on Samuel Bell. He's been in the slipstream, now in the side draft as they go side by side. Down the Mistral, up towards the Curve de Sangov, which he holds the inside on at this time. That's a double-edged sword because with such a wide corner ahead of them, there is the chances for Bell to try and carry more momentum from the outside, or as a matter of fact, as it would appear to be the case, goes earlier onto the brakes to try an attempted switchback, but just too high speed a corner to attempt it. Down towards Le Busset. Vermack to 5th, Bell 6th. Looking away then from their fight to find Ted Herkus now at the head of the table, looking for consecutive race wins to wrap out the season. Stoltz in 2nd. Tamburini still yet to have come to the pits. Actually, as it stands to be the case here, was some recent troubles for him as he now drops to 3rd. Was previously in the lead in that 813 Porsche. Scallops in 4th. Vermack now, as we saw there, in 5th. Bell in 6th. Valorio 7th in GT3. Nearest fight for the GT4s right now occurs between the 2 Audi sport cars in the top 5. Aidan Christie versus Marek Klopsch. 20 cylinders between those 2 there. 2 V10s in contention for that 4th place spot on track. German machinery dominating the top 5. Only one exemption being the leading Ginetta here. And the bizarre little British oddball car, the G55, once again leads in the GT4 category. What has been, for the most part this season, when one takes a look back through it, dominated by Mercedes. We have seen a few outlying victories then from the underdog groups like Ginetta and Alpine, but it has been a mostly AMG show this season between Brandon David and Matthias de Munster. We do just get word there was a disconnect on the grid for Luca Tamburini. Reconnects to the field, but reluctantly so. We'll lose several laps worth of time in the 813. Not the way he was hoping for his season to end here. In the 813, Porsche still had the chances to be among a possible top 5 if he played his cards right. That one has been sundered away from him, much out of his own control. On with the two Audis once again. Now, not too far away from them on the row behind are the two Alpines of Placé and Sutton, but they have distanced themselves much greater than the Audis have in front. They hold a ground of north of 2 seconds between each other. It's less than 3/10 between Christie and Klotz for control of 4th. In terms of fighting at the head of the field, Stoltz is 1.4 seconds to Herkes, and with Herkes in traffic at the moment, that's Richard Claffey alongside him in GT4 out through the Virage du Camp. There could be some complications here that might bring Stoltz ever closer to a race lead. Of course, strategy has been on the side of the 46, played things very tactically to put himself in that position, and now has to make the most of it, but he does have to navigate his way through traffic. No easy task, as we've seen from these two already. In the slipstream of one another, Marek Klotz still fights here with his fellow Audi of Aiden Christie for 4th in GT4 down through the Curb de San. See if we can go and catch on board with either party here, whether it's the fight for the race lead between Stoltz and Herkes, of which we see recently confounded by the introduction, rather unwittingly, or unwillingly I should say so, of the two Alpines. Whether it's the fight between the two Audi sport cars here going to catch on board with Aiden Christie and Marek Klotz. The fight for 4th in GT4 on board of the 95. Luca Tamburini, of course, still in the pit lane after his disconnect, so he won't be going anywhere particularly soon. Out through the Virage du Pont. They approach now Luca Tamburini, who has re-emerged to the track. I'll say there's been quite a swift recovery there. We see, though, trouble as Aiden Christie is forced to cut the Verrières. That is leaving quite a lot of space up towards the 95, who's got plenty more momentum off the exit of turn 2. In towards turn 3 here at the Virage de la Hotel. They're side by side for 4th place. Ultimately, though, having to fold back in a single file, we see the introduction then of the leading GT3s. So we see this fight in GT4 now meet another fight on track at the same time, and confounding the gap between the 46 and the 172. We see the Audis with their own water fight now find themselves stepping into the limelight here, as having to go off track to get up and around the Audi was the 172 of Pascal Stoltz, still in hot pursuit by half a second to Ted Herkes. Meanwhile, for the two Audis, 3/10. Much the same story, though, for the battle going on in front of them. So we quickly snap across to see in towards the Curb de San. Lexus versus Ford in GT3. Audi versus itself in GT4. 1st and 4th up for grabs across 2 divisions. Seeing here with the two Audis, Christie still holds ground as Klotz goes wide there down through Le Bousset. Meanwhile, we see a little wobble there off of the Virage de Bendor in towards the Curb de Garlaban. Now up towards the Virage de la Tour. He's got room for the inside here, so Stoltz has the chance for an immediate counter-attack back into the race lead. He's on the inside of the Virage de la Tour, now to the outside at the Virage du Pont. There is the possibility of a switchback in progress here, but he can't find the room for it. Forced out wide at turn 13. Herkes, with his elbows out, is not letting go of that race lead now that he has it in his grasp. The 46 leads here in Le Castellet, but I'd say their story is still far from over. Meanwhile, for the two Audis, heading back up towards the Verrières, Klotz looking more ambitious than the last lap. Of course, there were trouble in the last lap gone for Aiden Christie, forced a cut at the Verrières. Meanwhile, down at the Virage du Camp, you can just faintly see off in the distance the fight for the lead between the GT3s of Herkes and Stoltz. 3/10, now 4 between the pair of them. Same story as we find here for the two Audis down through the Virage de la Saint-Baume. Going to look back on board, though, with those two, as we see now with Luca Tamburini providing a little aided slipstream there from 10th on track. Ted Herkes has the chance to try and stave off an advance from the 172. The 813 keeps his foot in the floor, I should say, but does let off just a little bit to make sure he doesn't step in the way of this incredibly close fight down through the Curve de Sang. Stoltz right onto the rear bumper of Herkes. This could end in tears, and it does. It's contact between the 46 and the 172. This has kicked the barn doors wide open for Mr. Scallops. Go for the 394 to try and catch back up to these two. But it seems their animosity is at an end there as they get back up and going off of Le Busset, but they have sliced down the gap tremendously so to Scallops. Herkes still leads here, but a little bit of damage now and certainly some burnt out tyres on that Lexus. As we approach the halfway mark, just past it now as a matter of fact, in through round 8. As it would stand to be the case, if Stoltz can still finish in this position, he'll have the championship title in GT3, but this has been one hard fought, albeit for all of the wrong reasons. He's been fighting for the race win. The championship has been collateral for the 172 today. Looking back in with the two GT4s to see side-by-side action off of the Virage du Pont between Marek Klops in the 95 and the 32 of Aiden Christie. Looking on with these two, and they've had a fantastic rumble here for 4th between the two R8s. If you joined us last weekend, you would have seen our reports of the reintroduction of supercars to the Audi lineup. They'll be introducing the Nuvolari from next year onwards, a limited run twin-turbo V8 hypercar. It revs to 10,000 RPM. A very bizarre design, don't get me wrong. Audi going with this stark, retro, futurist, almost brutalist approach to their design in the modern day. Very reminiscent of previous concept cars in the last 20 years from Audi. But this is the spiritual successor of sorts to the R8. Now, were I a thinking man at Audi, I would maybe suggest introducing an even more powerful hypercar and call it the R10. Also having that named after the Le Mans car of which the R8 got its namesake from. But right now for the Volkswagen Group, it's actually, as it turns out to be the case, it's quite a lot of nepotism in the Volkswagen Group because they don't want models matching Porsche. Porsche, of course, the darling child of the Volkswagen Group. They don't want any models potentially taking sales away from Porsche. That is why you see cars like the Audi R8 go out of commission. It's quite a bizarre thing because you'll see that even the best of the Audis, if they're in a market also occupied by Porsche, their cars will be deliberately slower, which is why the only real unchained Audis you get to see are the RS6 and the RS7, because Porsche barely cares enough about the sedan market to compete with them with the Panamera. And if it's in the case of sports cars, coupes, hell, even SUVs, Porsche's going to try and wriggle their way in, and they've got the money from the Volkswagen Group to do so. 32 then still holds the ground off the 95. The two Audis still in contention. Going for the inside at the Verrières. Still side by side as they make their way through it, but Christie still holds the ground here. It's been a grand fight between the two R8s. The last of, up until last weekend, the last of Audi's supercar projects. Of course, the Nuvolari is set to take its place, but it isn't a permanent replacement. That's right up until Audi decides to wisen up and make a Nuvolari GT3, and then it'll be biting our words for the rest of the season. Taking a look then back up the order to see Herkes v Stoltz in its current action down the Mistral Straight there, along with Brandon David, third place in the GT4s. They rocket down towards Le Busset. 172, about 3/10 away from the 46. Onto the Mistral straight now we find here. Here's Klopsch and Christie. A tremendous sound between those two. You always know when Audi or Lamborghini are on track at your local racing circuit because you'll hear that 5.2 for miles around. Looking for the inside at Le Bousset, and it's super, super close between the pair of them. He could get squeezed through here, but he's got the run on the second half. We did say the second half can open up opportunities, but of course with more momentum around the outside, the 32 holds his ground. We see a curious case here for Matthias de Munster into the paddock. Now, I'm curious to see the front of the car to see if there's damage. No. So, a undercut strategy from de Munster. 10 minutes, was it early to the projected window with 40 minutes left to go in today's race. That is a curious one for the number one. Of course, championship title to defend and an even closer margin than what we have between Stoltz and Scallops. It's a 7-point margin down in GT4 between David and de Munster. Stealing away the talks in GT3 has not been Scallops v Stoltz. It has, as a matter of fact, been Stoltz v Herkus. In a world of their own here, still tooth and nail clawing at the chances of a race win today. Herkus, of course, looking to collect upon his second this season after his previous in round 7 just before. Of course, for Pascal Stoltz, he'd be looking at his 5th this season after wins in rounds 1, 2, 3, and 5. Side by side into the Curb de Sang. Herkus still holds the inside up and away from Stoltz. And these two, I mean, there's just a cut of a different cloth, is it not? Between these two. And as we saw with the two Audis, a tremendous sound between them. Even more so with the two V8 thundering along here in Le Castellet at the head of GT3. Hats off, though, to Aiden Christie for holding out this long with the pressure from behind. We saw it was a bit of a hiccup season here for Marek Klopsch. We've seen a few hiccups in the past in his time with Audi, but this is him firing on all 10 cylinders, and it has been such a formidable drive from both cars on track today in their element among that top 5. Now, they've recently been bumped up to 3rd and 4th because of the earlier pit stop by Matthias de Munster from Mercedes-AMG, so that could raise a few eyebrows in the next couple of laps. We see now up and ahead of the leading GT4 are our leading GT3s. Herkus and Stoltz just getting out past Matthew Copsey, looking for his second win of the season to round out his campaign with Ginetta in Season 4. It does make you wonder, of course, with the potency that Matthew Copsey brings to the table in GT4, even more so on his move over towards Ginetta, I should say, in GT4, away from Porsche. It makes you wonder, why did he not commit to a longer season? Did he just not have the time in Season 4, the multi-class? Of course, we know this is a driver with quite a fair few commitments in a few different disciplines, but of course, anything else between that is totally up in the air. For some drivers, it just simply is a case of wrong place, wrong time. People have other things to do during the summer, which is often why the summer ends up falling into, ironically, a bit of a cold season for esports. You see, though, hotting up between these two. Stoltz side by side with Herkus up towards the Curb de Sang. This could end ugly once again. This has been an area we've had to watch overtakes between our fingers through at the Curb de Sang. Down towards Le Bousset, looking for the inside once again. The 172 leaps for it, but he might run himself short down at the end of Le Bousset. No, the 172 has it. Pascal Stoltz licks the stamp and sends it up into the lead of the race, retaking that leading ground away from Ted Herkus. Marek Klopsch, suspicious that he's picked up a speeding penalty into the paddock. We'll see, though, as he's into the pits now out. And off of the jacks, we'll see, though, as it's about to face the music here for the 95. This could spell doom on his campaign against Aiden Christie. Let's see it, though. Across the line, no. So, breath of fresh air there for the number 95. No worries. The 46 still in hot pursuit, though, over Pascal Stoltz. We see the 95 having just left the pit lane. Let's go to catch back on board, though, with our leading duo as it's contact between Stoltz and Herkus at the very air. The Mustang, though, holds on. What a bit of car control there from Stoltz. That so looked like it was going to snap violently in the opposite direction, and it would have been pirouettes down through Verrières, but Stoltz unshaken by that recent bout of contact. 6 minutes out off of that projected second mass infill of the pits. Of course, we've seen a few earlier pit stops recently then from Marek Klopsch down in GT4. What's the cards then for these two? They've already come to the understanding that the chances between each other to fight this on track are slim. They're two sides of the same coin, pace-wise and technique-wise. It's curious as well when one considers there are the differences in their driving style, but the result of it is you have two drivers very, very closely matched to one another. And it makes for fascinating viewing, and it's been a real spectacle over the course of this round. And it's, I would say, overshadowed what has been the elephant in the room for Pascal Stoltz, which is his chances of a championship. Of course, still a 10-point lead over Mr. Scallops in Division 3rd for the GT3s. Far and away from this fight at the moment. And the throne lay vacant for a new ruler, and it could very well be Stoltz in this round of the championship. We see side by side there with the GT4 of Alexander Hrinko. Hrinko challenging Ted Herkus, and that leaves him with few choices there. Very nearly went to the pit lane. That is a curious one. It's worth noting Hrinko wasn't close enough to be fighting anyone at the time, so Lord only knows why his elbows were that wide out. We'll see though for Mr. Scallops. Toby Goodall's into the pit lane early by 4 minutes. Scallops stays out. Worth noting then for the rest of GT3, 4th place at the moment for Tyler Vermaat. We saw his fighting not too long ago with Samuel Bell. He battled on 2 McLarens. Vermaat stays out. Bell would be next on consideration of the GT3s. We see Brandon David will stay out. Matthew Copsey is in the pit lane on the lead of GT4. David stays out. Christie would be next on consideration from the GT4s at this time. Number 21, though, Samuel Bell in GT3 stays out. .34 minutes left to go then. The number 32 is going to move up into a provisional 2nd place. We see the 97 not long from dropping off of the jacks here. Matthew Copsey now off the jacks and on his way out of the pits in GT4s. He now drops from the podium. It's a Plasse up into a provisional 3rd. We see not too far away is Stephen Sutton. And actually pursuing for physical position of 11th is Luca Tamburini. And I mean, hats off to him here. He does have the chances as he will shift up an extra position now to 11th, fighting for 10th. If he can turn this background into a top 10 finish, even if it is behind a few of the GT4s, that's not too shabby whatsoever from the Argentinian talent in the 813. Recent troubles, though, I should point this out. Yellow flags for the 90... what is this? No, not the 95. It's the 93. It's Richard Claffey in the pit lane. Has he run out of fuel by chance? I can't note any damages there on the Mercedes. I'm not quite sure what's gone on for him there. If there was an incident, sadly, we just didn't see it at the time that it happened. But we do know now the 93 is in the paddock. We suspect a possible fuel issue, but we could be wrong on that assertion, so do not take our word on that one for gospel. We'll wait to see, though, from Claffey. Alexander Hrinko now in the paddock. No information to hand at the time then, so the fate of the 93 left rather erroneous on this grid. The Alpines are getting closer to each other for fighting at this time. That's for Division 3rd between Matteo Plasse and Stephen Sutton. Now into the pit lanes goes Samuel Bell up in GT3. Next in consideration looks to be the case there for Aidan Christie as the 16 stays out for another lap. We'll see for Aidan Christie. Will he be coming into the pit lanes at this time? As it looks to be the case, no. And behind him would be Luca Tamburini. Stays out also. Matteo Plasse and Sutton making their way through. 49 stays out, so too does the number 7. You see there emerging from the pits in front. I believe there is Alexander Hrinko. Going to catch on board then with the two Alpines at the head of the field. Meanwhile, just a quick glance over our shoulder to see the state of affairs between Pascal Stoltz and Ted Herkus. It's a 1.7 second lead, as now into the pit lane goes Toby Goodall and Anthony Valorio, as it happens to be the case as well. On board then with Stephen Sutton, winner in the Nürburgring in GT4. A triumphant drive for Alpine at that time. We finally got confirmation as to what happened there from Richard Claffey. And that is contact with someone upon exiting the pit lane is what led the 93 back into the paddock there. There was emergency damages. You see there sliding his way through the Curb de Sound for Stephen Sutton. See now left out by his lonesome, the number 7, as the number 49 into the paddock goes Matteo Place. Number 32 of Aiden Christie also in. We see there for Pascal Stoltz recently into the paddock in the 172, leaves Ted Herkus to retake the lead for the time being. Just under 30 minutes left to go as a new shift on the paddock occurs. Multiple drivers into the pit lane. For Matthew Copsey, you'll see the shift by the looks of it here up towards Division 3rd. Getting closer to retaking the lead. Sutton and David, the next in consideration in front of him. Bell and Valorio, 5th and 6th. For Max, still yet to have come to the pits. And now we also see the case for Mr. Scallops into the pit lane. Stoltz on his way out then. Scallops not far from dropping from the jacks, but we see not too far away would be Bell on his way down through the Curb de Sang, a few corners away, as it happened to be the case. But you can see the distance between Scallops and the exit of the pit lane. So literally the moment he comes off those jacks, he's straight out. 27, just under 28 minutes left to go. The 394 cleared for release. Leaves the pit lane 4th in the GT3s. As for Herkus, side by side there with Matthias de Munster, who at this time looks to be well within a chance of retaining that GT4 championship title on for 2 consecutive bouts in the Multiclass Championship. Of course, we'll see all of that, though, at the checkered flag. We'll hope to get interviews out of the 2 champions-to-be. Of course, all will be revealed in due course, and we can never really guarantee these interview slots unless they are booked way ahead of time, which, of course, we can't know because we don't know who the championship winners are. Ted Herkus into the pit lane. We'll see what the calling card is here for Tyler Vermaak. Down through to the Virage de la Tour. Has held out strong after his troubles earlier in the race. We saw, of course, there was an incident between himself and the 41 of Anthony Valorio off the exit of the Virage de Bendor. He'll stay out. So moving into the race lead goes the 888 McLaren of Tyler Vermaak. We'll see how long he's willing to commit to that second to last stint. Pascal Stoltz closing in on the 46, but he might be just too far away. I mean, you can see he's furthest up the order of any car in the paddock. We see leaving the pit lane goes Stephen Sutton. A drive-through penalty has been issued to Richard Claffey, so his fortunes have only gone from bad to worse here. The 46 is cleared for exit. The 172 is on the opening straight, but the 46 is already out. We see Anthony Valorio get up and ahead of him, but the 172 is right along with him, heading up towards the Verrières. He's closing fast into the Verrières. Close but no cigar, as it happened to be the case for Pascal Stolz, is holding that lead, provisional lead I should remind, is Ted Herkus. Vermaak actually leading here, but still yet to have come to the pit, so there will be that exchange later on in this race. Meanwhile, Brandon David is now into the pit lane in GT4. Matthew Copsey closing in then to retake the lead of GT4. Up in front of him, we note there the 21, close to two of the GT4s, Toby Goodall and Alexander Hrinko. David in the pit lane. We see leaving the paddock goes the 93, so Richard Claffey serving his drive-through penalty. The 97 back up into the lead on GT4. Matthias de Munster follows along with, so securing his odds at this time for the next 25 minutes. Now he has to make sure he holds that position up over Brandon David. Nothing, and I really do mean nothing, can stand in the way of his procession to the championship title at this time. Anything close to an intervention there from any one factor on the grid could compromise him. Looking here, Stolz v Herkus at a razor's edge down to the Virage de Bendor. Now the curb de Galaban here in Sector 3. But Max, still no indication on when he'll be coming in. He stays out onto lap 33. Herkus holds second. That provisional lead, as it happens to be the case here, over Pascal Stolz. Let's go to catch on board if we can here with the Mustang. We do see that the two Alpines have been reunited, but they're by 2.5 seconds to one another at this time. So getting a glance in if we can with the attacking Ford. Down in third place. Currently in the fight for second on board with Pascal Stolz. Possible champion to be tonight. 24 minutes stand between himself and history down to the Verrières. But his major nemesis on track today has not been what one would have suspected to be the championship rival, being that of Mr. Scallops, two-time GT champion in the Multiclass Championship. No, it's a matter of fact been Ted Herkus, winner of the Silverstone Ginetta Cup Special. But if he's carrying the same kind of mentality, along with his already known affinity for Ginettas, as demonstrated in Silverstone, when we head into the Ginetta Summer Series, if Herkus is on that entry list, this could be a very interesting next couple of weeks heading into that series. That'll be the dividing point between us and Season 5. Merging up and ahead there of Tim Brudo. Violently snapped out to the right there, trying to use as much of the slipstream before peeling out. See, up in front there is Valorio and the two Audis of Marek Klopsch and Aiden Christie. They are also reunited, and this time it's so close to contact between the pair. The Mustang squirrels out wide. They rub doors down to Le Busset. And somehow, through it all there, Pascal Stolz moves up to second. We are on touring car level timing between these two now. We saw heading in towards Le Busset, the back end came loose for Pascal Stolz. He had to wrestle the car back into form, somehow kept himself from clattering the Lexus. You can see, though, that little bump still infuriated Ted Herkus, and it led to that contact there at the Virage du Pont. And it did lead to them dropping a lot of time here. They are inadvertently giving quite the bit of advantage over to Tyler Vermaak at this time. Side by side then, as Stolz retakes the ground off of Herkus before the Verrières. Behind them is the two Audis of Aiden Christie and Marek Klopsch, also contending for position at this time. 11th overall on track is what they're fighting for. Well, yes, there has been certainly a level of animosity between these two over the course of this event. There is an underlying respect between these two drivers, knowing they are much on the same level as one another here. When we see these bouts of contact, they're swift to remedy it themselves. They don't really want to have race control getting involved, as that could cost them in the long run. They'd rather have the sort of gentleman's agreement and figure it out on track, which we have seen almost every single time they have made contact, which now, as we say, it is quite a few examples. It's the honour amongst drivers on this track. But I would like to point out their gentlemanly nature about dealing with these incidents has cost them about 35 seconds between themselves and Tyler Vermaak. We see for Ted Herkus on the counter-attack on the inside of the Curve de Sang. Out wide then goes Pascal Stoltz, rejoins the track in behind, now third. Closing in on the last 20 minutes of both this race and this season. Season 4's end looms yonder the horizon. We see off the exit of the Curve de, not the Curve de Bendor, the Virage de Bendor, now the Curve de Garlaban. In towards the Virage de la Tour. Into the Virage du Pont, where we saw that contact in the last lap. They figured that out amongst themselves, but now on to lap 35. On the opening straight, Stoltz has got the run here on the Lexus of Ted Herkus. There was that moment of suggestion there from Stoltz. Signer in chat asking, when does the next season start? If you join us during the news segment, we previously spoke about this, but it's coming up, I believe August 29th is when season 5 starts. And just quickly, as we pull away the battling graphic here, just to have another glance at that next season, just as they make their way through the Virage de la Saint-Baume off the exit of the Virage du Camp. Taking a look at that next season, yes, August 29th at the same time as today will be the start of Season 5 over in Kyalami. Back on, though, with Pascal Stoltz down the Mistral. Meanwhile, no suggestion yet on if Vermaak will be coming into the pits on this lap. Just under 20 minutes, I should say, 19 minutes and 20 seconds left to go. Looking to go side by side here in towards the Curve de Sang. Holding off from it, but trying to carry as much momentum as humanly possible on that Mustang. Not easy when he's dealing with the dirty air generated from the monstrous rear wing assembly of the Lexus RCF in front of him. Meanwhile, getting a look further around the track to see where other fights may be coming from. We also note then the Audis are still clashing for position. Fourth in the GT4s, up for contention between Aiden Christie and Marek Klopsch. We did note far earlier in the stream that Christie would be one to watch. Of course, already has an affinity for this track and this car. Has used it to deliver some great results in the past down in the AM category on the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series by Competizione Performance League. Is using a lot of that same experience to good use here to hold off Marek Klopsch. I must say he's had a much more vibrant performance than what we have seen on a few other occasions in this championship. We know it's been a bit of a rocky road for the Audi. This has been him at his best this season. You see in between the pair of them at the moment, Mr. Scallop's two-time GT3 champion, but could be the king of the grid no longer after today. We'll have to go back on the charge then for Season 5 if he wants to retake that mantle. Watching here for Stoltz v Herkus, 1.2 seconds in their last interval. Meanwhile, for Tyler Vermaak, we see him down towards the Virage du Pont. The suggestion still looms on a pit lane run, and now we get to see it from the 888 darting in towards the pit lane. He goes. It looked incredibly quick there. That could be trouble for Vermaak. We know there were already some anxieties from other drivers. We saw it directly from Marek Klopsch, who was concerned over his possibility of a speeding penalty. You can see for exactly what reason, as it's such an abrupt entrance into the pit lane here. Not using the one that was used in the French Grand Prix. We're using the one that's used in the GT World Challenge Europe Series. So a very sharp jut in on the right. Vermaak then into the paddock. Herkus up into the lead. Stoltz in second, and Scallop's looking at the possibility of a podium right now, though he's at the Curve de Garlaban. Meanwhile, down in GT4, Matthew Copsey leads over Matthias de Munster and Brandon David on the podium. Aidan Christie in 4th, Marek Klopsch in 5th, Matteo Place 6th, Sutton 7th, Prinko in 8th, Bruder 9th, Goodall in 10th, Claffey in 11th. Ramak drops off the jacks, but he's going to have to face the music. Was that too quick into the pit lane for the Triple Eight? Across the line he goes. And no. Looks can be deceiving then, evidently, for the Triple Eight. Was right on the money. He leaves the paddock, as it stands then in behind Mr. Scallops, but ahead of Samuel Bell, who, as we just saw there, recently had some troubles down at Le Bousset. So Tyler Vermaak to 4th. Meanwhile, Luca Tamburini makes the last of our pit lane attendees here with 15.5 minutes left to go in the last round of the championship. Getting a look in with the still ongoing, I would like to remind you, fight in GT4. And it seems to be the case these two have been inseparable for Audi Sport at this time. Aidan Christie and Marek Klopsch still contending position on the run down through the Virage de la Sainte-Baume on towards the Mistral. Down through the Curb de Sang, the two Audis still in hot pursuit of that 4th place spot on the grid. And Christie having put on a formidable show in defence ahead of Marek Klopsch. These two, like two peas in a pod there, inseparable with the Audis that round out the GT4 top 5. Having a glance in towards next week's broadcast itinerary. You'll be catching us for, as we see there, the number 5 recently picks up a drive-through penalty. That's for Tim Bruder. Caught in between there. What looks to be the number 16 and the number 42. Up in front, though, we can see a big spill over there. The 172 tries to navigate out through a huge ensemble of cars. Among them is Matthias de Munster. Going the long distance then, as the 172 drops significant grounds from Ted Herkus. Looking in towards next week's broadcast itinerary. Tomorrow we do not have a round from the NLRL Sunday League. That comes up next week on the 21st. When we head to round 5 of the championship. Our last visit to the Sunday League took us to our first ever stop at the Nordschleife with that series. Coming up next week, though, the first of the races will be coming out of the rerun of the Barcelona round of Season 4. Of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. That comes up Wednesday morning, 1 a.m. BST. Otherwise, it'll be Tuesday evening, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next week on what is going to be the 16th to the 17th of June. Later in that week, on the Friday, we're back on with Orange Line Racing for their first of the LMU GT3 Championship. They have cooked up for the Friday evening slot. And then on the Saturday, we have the first of the races, I believe, coming up here from the HCCL Ginetta Summer Series. And we also get to see the first of a round of Continental Racing League's Teams Championship Season 2. Live from 7 o'clock on Saturday the 20th. On Sunday, of course, we then return to the NLRL Sunday League at Donington Park, round 5 of Season 6. Watching then here with Ted Herkus, 12 minutes coming up on left to go here in Paul Ricard. He's looking for a second consecutive race win in this championship. Ultimately, though, it'll be the car behind him to take that championship by force. Pascal Stoltz in the 172 Mustang. Mr. Scallops in 3rd, Vermaak 4th, Bell 5th, Valorio 6th, and Tamburini maintains position in the bulk of GT3s. Hats off to him there for being able to reel that one back in after his disconnect. Back in with the main pack of GT3s. Copsey leads over de Munster, who, like we see then for Stoltz, while not leading their category, will be looking at the championship for it, with de Munster retaining his position at the head of GT4 after his championship title in Season 3. He'll look to go 2 on the trot in the number 1. Brandon David in 3rd, with Aidan Christie still holding off in 4th. Marek Klopsch rounds out the GT4 top 5. Place in 6th, Sutton 7th, Brinko in 8th, Bruder 9th, Goodall 10th, Claffey in 11th. Go back on board then with the two Audis as still occupying the possibly the most engaging battle on track at the moment, bar the slow proceedings back into a re-engagement of the lead between Stoltz and Hercus. That's a gap we'll monitor over the next couple of laps with 10 minutes left to go here in Paul Ricard. The leading GT3s, they're sizing up the chances of about 7 or 8 more laps before the end of today's race. More likelier than 7 laps than anything. I'd say that's 7 out of squeeze, more likely 6. On board here, though, with Marek Klopsch fighting for 4th. Aiden Christie has held this one off. An iron wall defence from the 32. Monitoring the traffic surrounding the lead of the race, and their gap maintains its current posture between the 46 and the 172, so no updates yet to provide that would change what is already going on between Hercus and Stoltz. Our main focus at this time then is this fight for 4th as the closest battle on track between any two cars. Taking a look further around the field then to see any other areas of interest at this time, as battling has started to simmer down. We do note then a recent introduction of a brand new fight, Mr. Scallops versus Tyler Vermack for the last of the podium positions. Right now it would do little to change the outcome of the championship between Scallops and Stoltz. In that case, I think Vermack's not going to mind too much trying to get into the mix here for a podium after the race he's had today. 8 minutes left to go then for these two as they barrel up through the Verrières. At the front of the field, the gap has actually started to increase from 1.6 seconds to 1.8, now dropping back down to 1.7 on the Mistral straight. Watching here with Tyler Vermack for the fight of 3rd place down through the Virage de la Saint-Baume. Now this is a curious one because watching here with the McLaren, you'll see what is a quite stark difference in straight line speed from the Nissan. It's a car that often goes under the radar for the talks on straight line speed. It's only in the slipstream where the McLaren can find itself staying along with. The gap currently 0.4 of a second, and it's going to take quite a fair deal to start reeling him back in. You can start to see the slipstream working, but that Nissan holds him at arm's length. It's only here until we get towards gear 6, up towards, I think, yes, about 6th gear here, where he starts to reel him ever so slightly back in. That Nissan, formidable as it is, we see those steps out wide. Holds the inside there, trying to play things more cautiously, knowing Vermack's going to try and leap for it. Ultimately, that difference in the line confuses the Triple Eight a little bit there, forces him out wide at Le Bousset. That could have ended in tears between the pair of them if they came together in that section. What is going on for the back end of that Nissan? Like a bull in a china shop. Out through the curb to Galavan. You see, it's really struggling here, that GTR. I mean, its time may have very likely come up now. So you see the McLaren attempting a switchback side by side off the exit of the Virage du Pont on towards lap 42. Here in the Circuit Paul Ricard, heading up towards the Verrières, an area where maneuverability is paramount and where the Nissan is evidently already struggling. This could be even better for the McLaren at this time. Attempting the move of a switchback there, but the gap was far too small to try and intercept. And also with the addition of traffic in front, that's Matthew Copsey's Ginetta, the lead of GT4. As the fight for a GT3 podium rages on past him. Meanwhile, I should point out, in the fight between the two Audis, they've now ran up towards the back end of the traffic in GT4 itself. So for Marek Klopsch and Aiden Christie, they do find themselves getting closer and closer. We see now side by side the 95 on the outside line of the exit of the Virage du Pont. It'll be to the inside of the Verrières. So two battles going on for the price of one. On the Mistral, we see Vermac intercepting Scallops. On the run down the Mistral straight up towards the Curb de Sang. This is what often does end in tears for these drivers, trying to go the long way around the outside. The Nissan holds the inside. Of course, we saw how unstable the rear end was off the exit of the Curb de Sang. Out wide, then rejoining the track down at Le Busset. The 394 holds the 888 at arm's length, but back on the inside at Le Busset. Meanwhile, looking in here, it's side-by-side down to the Virage de la Hotel, so they did hold it side-by-side all the way through the Verrières. And the 95 now looking to go up and ahead. The 32 returns to sender there, as it were. A returning volley by the Audis as they broadside one another down through the run of the Virage du Camp. Now the Virage de la Saint-Baume onto the Mistral straight. Super, super close between these two battles at this time. We see out through the Virage du Pont now forced back in behind. Goes Tyler Vermac, so a vehement defense of third by Mr. Scallops in a waning Nissan with 4.5 minutes left to go. Herkus now 2.3 seconds strong over Stoltz. It won't change much in the championship, but Herkus is looking to run home with another victory. Of course, still plenty of time left between us and the checkered flag. Anything can and will happen in races this closely fought. And in that fight for fourth, we're still seeing action from Audi. Aiden Christie couldn't settle for less in this time, given how long he's defended that position. To let go of it now would be heart-shattering for him. Off the exit of Le Busset, he did run a little bit out wide after skipping the curbs. And that does give Marek Klopsch some premier access to the inside off the second part of Le Busset. Now to the outside as we hit the Virage de Bendor. Towards the Curb de Garlaban we go then the Virage de la Tour back on with the GT3 fight up for the podium as Vermac now practically super glued to the rear bumper of the Nissan. A car that has held strong 2 seasons in a row then for Mr. Scallops has met its match from McLaren and even more so from Ford this season. They're side by side once again towards the Curb de Sang, then towards Le Busset, back in a single file there as Scallops holds his ground, forces Vermac to run from the outside to intercept him for that third place spot. Is not going to make this one easy on the 888. Still a newcomer to this series. Of course, we've seen that Tyler Vermac is a driver of quite high pedigree in the Assetto Corsa Competizione world. Multiple-time championship runner-up over on the NLRL Sunday League. Currently one of its contenders in Season 6. Down through the Virage de la Tour. He's got a better run of things. Down towards the Virage du Camp is up and ahead of Mr. Scallops. And a great move then by Tyler Vermac. Held out strong for that move. Now takes third with 2.5 minutes left to go. We're on to the penultimate lap of racing here in Paul Ricard, and a recent transfer to the podium for the 888 McLaren. Now he has to try and hold that Nissan away before the Mistral straight, because he will be intercepted if he cannot achieve that. Aiden Christie, as it happens to be the case now, significant gap ahead of Marek Klopsch. 5.7 seconds between the warring Audis in the back end of GT4's top 5 as Herkus gets out past. Now, if we've got to catch on board with that Nissan, this could be a curious angle to explore, as we do see here battling between the two Alpines for 6th. Sutton and Placé side by side at Alpine's home race here in Le Castellet. In through to the Curb de Sang. Sutton's got the run here on the 49 of his fellow Alpine, Matteo Placé, who's himself competing from a home race. French talent losing ground out towards Sutton, who found himself king of the Nürburgring in GT4 this season, giving Alpine their one and only victory in Season 4. Now looking to go and catch on board if we can here with the Nissan, which we see, actually surprisingly still, Scallops losing even more ground because he's sliding out wide from the Curb de Sang. Those tyres are melted. Ted Herkus, he starts the last lap of the race. Still with ground ahead of Pascal Stoltz. Tyler Vermack, of course, recently up towards that third place spot. Mr. Scallops, a reluctant P4, and is seeing his championship chances fade away here. He had a good run of it over this season. 2 consecutive GT3 championships. He is not leaving this behind, but he will not find himself, by looks of it, here champion this season. He must then pass along the crown to a new driver. Meanwhile, having a glance back into those Audis, they are not getting much closer to each other now, as we see that gap stays as wide as it was in our last view in with those two. Going to catch on board then with Ted Herkus. Not long from now to be accompanied to the line by Pascal Stoltz, who will be, as it stands then, a champion in only a few corners' time. A very hard-fought lead from this one here. We had word in from Marek Klops what exactly happened between himself and Christie. There was contact between the two Audis, so a possible post-race investigation coming in after the last round of the championship, but making his way in towards the third sector for the last time today. It has been a very heroic drive in the making here from the 46, albeit one that has had a few bumps and scrapes along the way, but it's been an otherwise gentlemanly agreement between himself and Pascal Stoltz. These two have fought incredibly hard for the race lead today, but as we round in towards turn 13 here at the Virage du Pont, the checkered flag awaits the arrival of the number 46 Lexus, looking for a consecutive bout of winning streaks here in the circuit. Paul Ricard down towards the line. The last round of the championship is won by Ted Herkus. Not to be outdone, though, across the line from behind him. Pascal Stoltz take a bow. While it may have not been the 5th career win of the season he was hunting for, you are looking right here and now at the 172 Mustang of Pascal Stoltz, your Season 4 GT3 champion. A properly heroic drive indeed from this one here. Dominant throughout the season, but we're far from done on formalities. We'll get round to everything in due course. Matthew Copsey is not far himself from the line to see his 2nd victory of the season in GT4. Meanwhile, Scallops 4th, Bell 5th, Valorio 6th, Tamburini, the triumphant return to the bulk of GT3 there after his disconnect, makes a properly heroic return there to 7th. Watching here with Matthew Copsey. A valiant return to form then from the 97. Has been absent for the majority of the season. Better late than never, though, for the number 97 down towards the line. Will win in GT4. A brilliant drive indeed from Matthew Copsey. No mistaking that point there, but from behind him, approaching the line, is Matthias de Munster, and he retains the crown at the head of GT4, the number 1 across the line to see the championship once again in his hands. A brilliant season then by Matthias de Munster. Held out strong, a 7-point gap between himself and Brandon David. Close but no cigar. De Munster maintains the title. 2-time GT4 champion now, Matthias de Munster. What will be the next step for him? We hope to get a word with him a little later on. We'll try and get an interview in as well from Pascal Stoltz, your GT3 champion. At the end of today's race then, 2 race winners that were not the champions themselves. Ted Herkus takes a 2nd victory of the season, and the same story for Matthew Copsey in GT4. Your 2 champions in GT3, Pascal Stoltz in GT4, Matthias de Munster. What a season it's been between these two then. An absolutely unmistakable drive throughout the season for the 172. Makes his way back into the paddock. A champion here in the Multiclass Championship. A bittersweet feeling for Mr. Scallops, a driver who had dominated the field for 2 seasons. Now sees the GT3 Championship fall into the hands of another. After 2 seasons undefeated. All good things must come to an end, but I don't think this is the end of the road for him. We could see an even more rejuvenated Mr. Scallops in towards Season 5 starting on August 29th later this year. Pascal Stoltz, your new GT3 champion. Matthias de Munster maintains the crown for 2 consecutive GT4 championship titles. So then, looking to catch on with a possible interview from your 2 champions this season. We'll try and get a word in with Pascal Stoltz. Now, of course, I cannot guarantee that they will pick up onto these calls. So you will have to bear with us for just a moment here. Do bear with. We had a few difficulties there trying to get in touch with Pascal Stoltz. We'll try again in a moment's time. We're going to try and get a word in there with Matthias de Munster, your two-time GT4 champion. Now we're on board with your two-time GT4 champion, Matthias de Munster. Matthias, how are you feeling then?
Hey, it was amazing. Another season, and I'm still so addicted to the whole multi-class. Same drivers. Tom Wells beat David was amazing. I did have a lot of issues today with the issues, just a lot of traffic. I had a good pace, but I kept running into traffic, and I was so scared to get like a penalty or like just something silly because the points were like so close. It was like so on edge for the last round, but it was amazing. So congrats to like everybody.
It's been a phenomenal season for you as well. You've really taken the stride from your championship in season 3. You've been very swift to continue that hot streak of solid results and race wins in towards season 4. So what's season 5 got in store for you? Of course, we've got now the Ginetta Summer Series, and then back on August 29th, we have the start of season 5. So what's the next steps forward then for a two-time GT4 champion?
I would think at some point switching cars would be really fun to try. But at the same time, I really feel good in the Merc. I love the Merc. Just I love the way it looks, and I'm so used of fighting with it. So that's like the only thing. I'm for sure gonna go full send again. I hope I can fight the same guys, but maybe I'll bring a different car. Maybe we'll see.
We'll be keeping an eye then peeled to the track over at Kyle Army during the testing sessions on the run in towards August 29th. We'll be trying to keep our head down and see what pops up there. Could be you in a different car for all we know, but I'd say it's been a very, very strong season. Very well done to you, of course. albeit second in today's race, but I highly imagine that that affects you too greatly with multiple race wins over the course of this season and a championship for the second time on the trot, undefeated then since season 3. A heavy target on your back then, I imagine, heading in towards season 5.
Yeah, and a shout out to Copsy won today. Like he was driving the balls of that Ginetta. It's crazy. It slows down so much on that straight and it still gets the pace down. Like he finished like 10 seconds ahead. And shout out to you too, of course. Like your broadcasting, everything you do, amazing stuff, man. I love watching the streams afterwards.
It's my pleasure, really. It's been fantastic being in on this project since the introduction of the third season, with the introduction of the GT3s and GT4s for their second season ongoing. And now into its third season. Has been another fantastic championship. So we do look forward ourselves towards season 5. And it's been a wonderful result for you today, walking home with now 2 GT4 championships in this series under your belt. And it's been brilliant for you today. So very, very well done and all the best to you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to HCCL. Thanks to you. Thanks to everybody. It was really fun. See you all next season.
Yeah, all the best. So that was Matthias de Munster, 2-time GT4 champion. Next, we're going to try and get a word in with your new GT3 champion, Pascal Stolz. Now, again, as we mentioned before, we did have a few issues trying to get in touch with him, so we can't guarantee anything right away, but you will hear from us again on the results of that. Now we're on board with the GT3 champion for the first time in the Multiclass Championship then. Pascal Stolz, how are you feeling?
Good. It was an intense last race, but overall a very good season, I would say.
A properly dominant drive, though, throughout the season. And I imagine this has been it's been quite the thing to see for us here. Obviously, seeing your performance in the Carousel Cup gave us the early indications this one could definitely be championship material over on the Multiclass. And you've proven us right over the course of this season. It's been fantastic. So what's the sort of plan coming forward in towards season 5?
Never change a winning system, right? So I probably stay with the car and try to defend the championship. Give it all and, I don't know, try to come out in front again.
I mean, it's been a fantastic season for you as well. I mean, looking back through the last couple of races before today, of course, gave multiple race wins. I think you were charging for the possibility of your fifth. You had a fantastic fight today with Herkis, all things considered, but still four, and currently then a 50% win rate this season alone. So that is quite a fantastic statistic. You were matching verbatim then the performance of your championship rival, Mr. Scallops, last season.
Yeah. He was strong last season. He also was strong this season, but not strong enough, I guess.
Right. Anyway, I'll leave you to it. It's been a fantastic season for you. Very, very well done, and all the best to you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Awesome, awesome streams, by the way.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. All the best. Take care.
Thank you.
And so that was your GT3 champion, Pascal Stoltz, after a phenomenal season here in Season 4, the Multiclass Championship. And that wraps up the season after what has been a phenomenal last couple of rounds here. 63 days of bliss here in Season 4, but all good things must come to an end. And looking forward to the road ahead for Season 5. In between it, though, we do have the Ginetta Summer Series over here on HCCL, so do look forward to that one. And having a glance at when that series will be starting, the Ginetta Summer Challenge, as it's called, will start on the 20th of June, a week from now at the Brands Hatch Circuit, where we'll also be heading the week thereafter to Alton Park, Donington Park and Silverstone. Over 4 weeks of fun with Ginetta. We'll be heading back in towards the Multiclass Championship then on August 29th at the Grand Prix Circuit Kyalami for the first round of the championship. The two 90-minute races coming up before the first half of the season wraps. We'll be seeing competition from Kyalami, the Nürburgring, Hungaroring, Bathurst, Zolder, Watkins Glen, Spa and Imola. That's all from us here on TRTN. If you're joining us later on next week, we get on with more action from the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. And you'll not be seeing anything from us tomorrow, as we do not have a round this week of the NLRL Sunday League because of the 24 hours of Le Mans. Do feel free to go over and watch that now. We will be doing the same. That's all from us here on TRTN. A wonderful rest of your evening to you. All the best and take care.